City Council meeting for Monday, January 28th, 2019. I'd ask everyone in attendance to rise and join us in singing O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you to the National Film Board for the images of our country and to an alumni of our very own Grand Prairie Boys Choir for the audio. I will look for a motion to adopt the previous council meeting minutes. Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Mayor Will Given. I move the council adopt the minutes of January 14, 2019 as presented.
Thanks very much, Councillor Minhas. Any discussion or debate on that set of minutes? Are there any errors or omissions that we need to correct before we adopt them? Not seeing anybody ring in, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. And that motion carries. I'll look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that Council adopt the agenda as presented with the addition of item 8.1, request for variance to policy 401.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Any discussion or debate on the agenda as presented? Any discussion or debate on the agenda as presented? Councillor Thiessen?
Yes, later on in the agenda, there's a portion to discuss the Swan City Hockey Association, the Grand Prairie Storm funding request. I would move, with the absence of many councillors here today, that we table this until our next council meeting.
Okay, thanks. So that's a motion to amend the agenda by tabling item 9.11 to our subsequent council meeting. Is there discussion or debate on the amendment? On Councillor Thiessen's amendment? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I don't think I can support this. I think that council acts as a body, not as a group of individuals. When we have quorum, I think that means that council is present and council can and should make decisions. So therefore, I cannot vote in favor of this amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate? I'll say that I will support the motion. I absolutely appreciate Councillor Bressie's point about council acting as a body, and as long as there's enough of us here, then we can absolutely have a council meeting, and all of our decisions are legitimate. I would also note that because of our short bench, as it were, there are a number of our council colleagues that might like to have an opportunity to express their opinion, particularly on this point. There were some council members that would have been willing to call in this evening, but there was some discussion that we may be able to table this to a subsequent meeting. And on that basis, I informed the council members that they would likely have a chance to be a part of the discussion debate at that subsequent council meeting. So I would encourage council members to consider that and give those council members that would have otherwise called in for this an opportunity to be here next time. Certainly, if there's anybody that's in the room this evening to speak to this topic, they'd be more than welcome to present during our delegation portion or return later on at our subsequent council meeting, should this amendment pass. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm just ready to close on the amendment motion, so if there's any other discussion on it, I can hold my comments till then.
Okay, we'll let you close. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I also feel the same way as Councillor Bressie. I think that our schedule of meetings is put out in enough time, and sometimes we can make things and sometimes we can't, but that's how I feel at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Any other discussion or debate before I go to Councillor Thiessen to close? Seeing none, Councillor Thiessen to close on the amendment. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I cannot disagree with Councillor Bressie or Councillor O'Toole that as a collective body, we can make the decisions that are presented in front of us today. But in the spirit of teamwork and debate, I know that many times I come to this council table prepared to express my opinion on any given subject matter, and I also am prepared to have my mind changed over any course of that subject matter and the discussion that entails. And the course of the debate can sometimes change the course of a direction. Seeing that this is no small matter, I would strongly encourage my council mates either to consider changing their vote at this time or to vote in favor of this amendment so that we can have a fulsome debate with all members of council present when discussing this item. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So that's the discussion debate on Councillor Thiessen's amendment, which would have the effect of tabling item 9.11 to our subsequent council meeting. So we'll call for the vote on Councillor Thiessen's amendment to the agenda, and then we'll vote on the agenda as recommended by Councillor Bressie after that. So first on Councillor Thiessen's motion, which would have the effect of putting the storm funding request over to our next council meeting. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does not carry, so that item will be on our agenda this evening, and we'll move on to Councillor Bressie's motion, main motion to adopt the agenda with the addition of item 8.1, variance to policy 401. Any other discussion or debate on the agenda? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And that will take us into our delegation portion of our agenda. We had probably a number of delegations this evening, but there was one that let us know ahead of time that they planned to be here, and that was a delegation from Aquaterra Utilities with respect to their business plan and bylaw and rate updates. I see the Jeff and Jeff show in attendance. Welcome, gentlemen. If you'll just introduce yourselves for the minutes and anybody that might be watching, welcome.
Thank you. Jeff Johnson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Aquaterra Utilities.
And my name is Jeff Pieper. I'm the interim CEO for Aquaterra and usually the CFO for Aquaterra.
Welcome, gentlemen.
We appreciate the opportunity to speak today and present our rates for 1920. What we're seeing is a 2.5% increase for water and wastewater, and a 6.5% decrease for solid waste collection at the curb. Largely these increases are for capital improvements as well as operational costs. And the capital projects that directly impact the city of Grande Prairie include a second feed line for the water, the riverbank and intake projects, and 3 studies that are coming. One for the Hughes Lake, one for the sanitary downstream of the city intensification, and one for 108th Street south of the future hospital. So we're looking at really providing services, additional services for Hughes Lake, of course, but as well as improving our services within the community itself.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Any questions for the delegation? So I just recognize this is item 9.2.1 on our agenda later on. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you for coming in, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Question I have for you guys has to do with recycling. It's the world recycling markets have been changing, as I know you guys are aware, and it's been impacting services and prices across the world. I'm just kind of curious, what's Aquaterra doing right now to keep an eye on the situation, to monitor what's going on with recycling, and to be proactively planning for the changes in the world market that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, what we've seen is our costs go up over the last year. What we've chosen to do is absorb that cost and not pass it on to our customers. But there always has been concern, or I guess not necessarily with our contractor, but in North America about what is actually happening to the product. So we've committed to doing an audit of the recycling process in the second quarter of 2019. Currently, we're sourcing qualified consultant or a company to do that for us.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I do have a couple questions, but I'm only going to have one right now, and we'll see if council colleagues have other questions. Thanks for coming in, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Making yourself available to present this publicly. I just had a question in regards to your 2020 vision. Maybe to the large viewing audience at home and the people here today. Could you explain the $25 million cash flow for your 2020 vision? So you guys have been dubbing that as the 25 and 20. What's the purpose of having that $25 million cash flow available to you?
Yeah, I can try that. I guess our board of directors set that as our strategic vision back in 2011. It was to grow from about 12 million in cash flow to 25 million in cash flow by 2020. As part of that was to double dividends to our shareholders and keep within the median of rates to comparable cities in Alberta. So it was trying to keep everything in balance and be able to find new ways to make more revenue while not impacting the rates as much.
Okay, thank you for that. So our dividends last year between all shareholders was about $4.5 million. $4.4 million. So what do you do with the remainder? Do you just invest it, or does it go into other capital projects, or does it sit in the bank?
Our cash management policy, basically the excess cash that's left in our company at the end of the year gets split between dividends to our shareholders and into either a capital or a business development fund for future use. And it's put in an investment account until it's utilized.
Okay, thank you. I'm still the only one in the queue? Fair enough. All right, here's the firing line right here, gentlemen. Just a quick question. I was looking at the tables that you guys provided on the rate changes and then later on your capital plan summary. And I appreciate all the work that's been done in the city of Grande Prairie. But what I did notice is that there's significant contributions going out towards all of our other shareholders, largely to the county and Claremont and, of course, the water line to Wembley. So I guess my question is, with the increase in rates and the number of ratepayers in the city of Grande Prairie, is it fair to assume that the city of Grande Prairie residents are subsidizing growth in the county?
Just to answer that, it's a complicated question. On the water side, with the uniform rates that are specified in our unanimous shareholders agreement, absolutely, the costs are collected as a system and charged out as a system. Grande Prairie's got a more compact system with more users. It's going to be cheaper to operate than a system that's got less users in a larger system. For the wastewater systems, we track those costs individually and we set those rates, and you'll see as we spend more money in those systems, the rates will increase more substantially as provided in the table.
Is there a time horizon on that at all? Like 5-10 years?
5-10 years for increased rates in the...
I guess, for what city taxpayers are putting in through the Aquaterra rates that are set that they pay to see the payback from the investments in our rural region.
I'd have to get back to you on the calculations on that. Okay. Have them in my rate available.
No, that's fair. I also noticed that this 2021 plan, or in these tables, a lot of them are going to 2021. So I guess my next question for you is, the city of Grande Prairie spent significant dollars over the past few years in upsizing our pipes in the downtown core, as well as doing the facade improvements. Does Aquaterra have any plans to replace those old systems without an assistance from the city in their future plans, 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, we have nothing that's imminent. What we found, our oldest part of the infrastructure was in the phase 1, and where we had pieces of the water pipe sent to Vancouver tested, and still saying with the AC pipe had 20 to 30 years life expectancy left. So that's where we're getting independent testing done. And say phase 4, for example, the water lines from one block is 69, one's from 74. Really, it doesn't require replacement anytime soon. And from a sanitary perspective, if you're not densifying, we can reline that pipe and bring it to its original useful life.
Okay.
So without densification, unlikely we're going to be digging up downtown.
Okay, well, thank you. My hope is that in the future, when I see these project grants and stuff like that, the City of Grande Prairie will have more significant investments through the Aquaterra business planning process, especially where it's needed, and it's not at a we must do this now because the system's sort of failing. I'd like to see that kind of proactivity happening within our community. The last thing that it's mainly just a comment, so something to consider. But I did some quick math, a really quick math on the rate changes. So $2 to water, $2 to wastewater, based off the city of Grande Prairie's population. I multiplied that over 70,000 potential users. I know we don't have 70,000 people online, but roughly about 25,000 people online. And it worked out to an increase in about $1.1 million to the overall bottom line of Aquaterra over the course of one business year. I know that if I were to count the 70,000 residents, that would be $3.3 million. And I thought that was kind of interesting. That's roughly about what our dividend check was this past year. Now, that's all speculative, of course, but I would hope that I know council a lot of the time wears the utility rate increases, and our customers come to us as they come to you. We sort of share that mutually. Maybe a consideration of, as we grow, maybe there's a point in time where we could go a few years of not increasing the rates or just sticking in line with inflation, because 2.5 is an inflationary increase, but it's also above the rate of inflation as well. So I hope Aquaterra would take that into consideration, and thank you again for coming here today.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Anybody else for our Aquaterra delegation? And gentlemen, you certainly, I think it was referenced, I'm not sure that I got the numbers though specifically. What are the rate increases percentage-wise in the city of Grande Prairie contrasted to the other parts of the system?
Sure. So for water, again, it was 2.5%. That's uniform across all our systems, so all our shareholders. Wastewater, 2.5% for the city, 12% for the county of Grande Prairie. We've chosen to subsidize the rates based on the capital projects.
12% plus the subsidy.
Plus the subsidy. Sorry. County other, 10%. So that's Carriage Lane, Taylor, those aspects because they're using the city system. Sexsmith is 10%, and Wembley we don't have that. We don't own alternatives since July.
And so what would the rate increases been had the municipality not chosen to subsidize the rate increase?
It would have been 15, I think, is what
16.
16% increase, but they're choosing to use municipal taxes to subsidize that, which every municipality has the right to do that.
Right, or their discretionary dividends, or we don't know where it's coming from, but they are subsidized.
Okay, that's great. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. Question for you guys: do you happen to know if we decided we wanted to subsidize these rates and just keep them at the same level, what that would cost us as a municipality?
Not off the top of my head, but we could get that calculated really quick. So.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Was there anything else for our delegation? Councillor O'Toole?
Just a comment. I'd like to thank you very much for hosting the Aquaterra 101 on Friday. I don't have any questions today, but there was a lot answered on Friday, and I do appreciate that, and looking forward to other ones in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Looks like we've worked our way through there. So, gentlemen, thanks very much for being here this evening. Okay, as I mentioned, this delegation portion is open to anybody that wished to come forward to present to council. So if there was anybody else that wished to make a presentation to council with respect to any item on our agenda or any other community-related matter, so long as it isn't the subject of a public hearing, we do have one, the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan. So if there was anybody else here that intended to present to council on any other community-related matter, now would be the time to do that. I see a little bit of action stirring out in the back. And so I just ask you to come forward, gentlemen. You kind of saw the drill there. I know that this is, I think, the first time for each of you presenting here. So if you just introduce yourselves so that we can make sure that we get it for the minutes, and for anybody that might be watching online, and make yourself welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Kraus. I'm a business advisor, chartered professional accountant here at MMP in Grande Prairie. Also a board member with the Grande Prairie Storm and Swan City Hockey Association. I've been involved with the Grande Prairie Storm since July 2018, so relatively new, but I will say during that time it's been extremely rewarding. We've noted growth in our community involvement, which is a huge thing, growth in our sponsorship and our ticket sales. So A lot of positive movement going in the right direction, which is great to be a part of a club like that. So, and I'll introduce our business manager, Eric Hine.
Thanks for having us this evening. My name's Eric Hine. I'm the business manager for the Grand Prairie Storm. I've been with the Storm since about the middle of June. I'm originally from Ottawa, so I'm still learning Grand Prairie, and from what I've been told, this is a mild winter, but I like it so far. So you guys have really opened your doors, and the community's been really inviting for me and my family. So glad to be here, and glad to be taking part of the Storm and our season so far.
So we're here today. We've kind of chatted a little bit about it, seeking a cash flow investment from the City of Grande Prairie to assist us in getting back to a sustainability for the future, where we can maintain our operations and continue to strive to be one of the premier franchises in the AJHL. The first question that, in my mind, if I was sitting in your shoes, would be, why is this happening? Why is this needed? And it isn't based on what we're doing now or what we've done in the past few years. It stems back to reductions that we had in sponsorship and ticket sales when the oil and gas industry took a hit in 2015. So during that year, we watched our sponsorship and ticket sales fall 35%. In the same time, our costs go up every year as travel costs and fuel costs, living in the north and traveling to southern cities, increases every year. So that's where that stemmed from. Fortunately enough, we have been able to survive thus far, which is awesome, and we are growing. Just this season alone, in these first 7 months, we've noticed 35% increase in our ticket sales. So the City of Grande Prairie, our community members are on board with what we're doing, and they're buying back into the City of Grande Prairie Storm Hockey Club. In the same sense, our corporate sponsorship has also noted a 5% increase year over year, which shows that the businesses in this community are on board with what we're doing, and we hope to continue that. More importantly, with the addition of Eric and with some other internal goals that we have, we've really strive to make a larger community impact, and I'm sure you guys have seen throughout that we have we're in the schools more, we're out in the parades more, trying to get our name out there, because as Mayor Given alluded to last meeting, was if you don't have community involvement and you don't have areas for people to enjoy the city, you are a giant work camp, and that's what we're trying to provide, is that we do provide value for the city, and we do provide an economic impact for the businesses that work here. And then the last point that I'd like to make is the economic impact that the Grande Prairie Storm has. So the last economic impact study that I had seen was 2013, and it was a value of approximately $1.7 million. Just based on normal inflation and growth rates, that's closer to 2.2 now. So based on the viability of this, based on a $2.2 million economic impact, reduced rent or a rent rebate from the city generally goes right back into the local businesses, especially that downtown core. So it doesn't come as just a rebate. It's throwing money back into our downtown core and those downtown businesses and our local businesses that need that so much. So definitely a return on investment in terms of that. The last point I'd like to make is the viability of our repayment. So we are here today seeking a loan, and that needs to be noted. This is not a bailout. This is not money that is not going to be repaid. This is a loan bearing interest at a very reasonable rate of 4.25%. Based on the term of the contract, that's interest earned for the city of $17,000 over that term. Your first question is, well, are you going to be able to repay it? And based on the forecast and the growth rates we've recognized, we will be able to repay this loan, barring no economic downturns, which as much as I'd like to read the future, I cannot. We are a sustainable, viable business to repay this loan. So I'd like to open it up. Any questions or concerns that anyone have?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for the presentation this evening. So we are in the delegation portion. We will deal with this under 9.1, which is our second piece of committee business, but there is an opportunity for the council members here this evening to ask questions of our delegation. Councillor Bressy.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I don't have too many questions for you guys, mostly because I was at the committee meeting and I got to ask you guys a lot of questions there. and so I don't have too many tonight. Two questions I do have for you is, one is trying to figure out, you guys are projecting your regular season, you're going to finish with a profit. That's a projection right now. My understanding is regular season ends beginning of March-ish. So do you know about how long, I know it takes time to get the actual final books and all of that, but you know about how long after the end of your regular season it takes you guys usually to know, yeah, we've made a profit, we haven't made a profit, it's in this order of magnitude?
Yep. So we have monthly board meetings, and at that time we would go over it. So if our season, hopefully it doesn't end early March, and we go for a nice playoff run. But with that being said, we would be able to tell essentially the subsequent month how we finished. Our year end for the association is May 31st. So for actual financial statements, it would be a little bit after that. But just internally to know if we were going to be on side, we would know a month after the season.
And then if you guys do make playoffs, or when you guys make playoffs, I'm kind of curious, how does that affect the team? Is that an extra expense that doesn't get covered, or is that extra profit? How does that usually affect your profitability?
Yeah, and it kind of depends on how well you do and where you finish in the standings, because if you play 4 games and you have to spend them all on the road, or you play 7 and you're not the home team, then you're going to have an expense of the travel. Obviously, the additional ticket sales, usually you get some more people running through, so generally, if we make playoffs, it will increase our profitability. And hopefully, the longer you go, the more profitable you become.
And then my last question for you, gentlemen, was, I know at committee meeting there was some discussion about a bit more information we wanted, including just a better picture of what the existing debt looks like. Has that been forwarded onto the city yet at all, or?
I haven't heard anything. I reached out to a member of the city asking what I could provide, and I wasn't told to provide anything. I provided some additional details on some security on the loan. That was kind of a concern that was brought up, and which is warranted. It's a loan. And I provided the information on that. But aside from the actual details, I haven't been asked. So
thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Actually, thanks for being here, Eric and Mark. It's funny that you mentioned securities, because that was the question that I wrote down here. And maybe you could enlighten the council here today as to what type of security the storm could provide the city of Grande Prairie if we were to provide you the loan that's requested.
Yeah, absolutely. So I dug into it a little bit more because I didn't want to give you a gray answer last time. And the security that we could provide, just being a franchise or a not-for-profit group where we don't have, like I said, brick and mortar assets to pledge security, we do have the AJHL franchise that we would be willing to give as the collateral on the loan. Speaking with the league commissioner here today, average league values for an AJHL franchise is between $500,000 and $750,000, so more than securing the loan on the franchise. So whether the city would, barring catastrophic events and we could not repay the loan, from there you decide if you want to take that franchise and resell it, and you could sell it for a profit or whatever it might be. But that would be our collateral on that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I know you're hearing all that. The clucking chickens, that's probably one of our council members calling in. Not 100% certain. So in regards to the sale of a franchise, obviously you'd have to have a market to sell it to. Is there any examples in the AJHL of a team that was sold to another city recently?
Whether it's sold to another city or sold to somebody else who wants to come in, I think people see that this is a viable option, and if they can come in without any debt, and then it's like I said, life's good. So I don't know if it would be selling to another city or wherever it would be, but I can't give you an exact example, but just based on the fair market values that we got from the commissioner today, there is value there. And $500,000 to $750,000 shows me that to own an AJHL franchise is something that's still warranted and wanted in the Alberta areas. So
in regards to the actual ownership group, so if you guys, now this is worst case scenario obviously, but if council granted you the loan and you weren't able to pay it back and you had to fold, then if I'm understanding this clearly, the city would retain ownership over the storm. What happens to the other owners?
So as a not-for-profit group, we actually don't have shareholders or owners. That's kind of one thing that's kind of got lost in translation is we are a not-for-profit. we're not a charity organization, but we do run as a not-for-profit. So at the end of the day, if the storm generates, just rough estimate, ballpark, say we made $5 million, that doesn't go out to our shareholders. Nobody benefits from that. And in the same sense, if it sells, you would just be getting the franchise, so the right to own a franchise in Grande Prairie. So the actual association would remain with us.
Okay, so you guys would just continue to run, and we would just have the ownership.
Yeah. So we essentially wouldn't have a hockey team. We'd have an association with a.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Any other questions for the delegation? Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I just, thanks very much, Mayor Given. Is there an opportunity to get a letter, a promissory note from any of the stakeholders in the committee?
Yeah, and that was
Like in worst case scenario.
Yeah, and that was kind of brought up at the community living meeting. One thing I will say is the stakeholders have contributed at this point $350,000 of their own money that is not a charitable donation and not a tax write-off in any sense. So to ask for anything further, I think is a little bit, especially for a not-for-profit group that has an economic impact for the city of Grande Prairie of $1.7 million in 2013, is a little bit unreasonable in my estimation. Just based on the fact that, like I said, there's members, myself included, who pay to be on the board of directors and contribute our own money, and to ask for a note on that would be tough.
Just one more question. I was there on Friday night. Not a great night for the Storm. Great for the Hockey Hall of Fame we have going on. Thank you. But did you sign that fellow from Red Deer?
Yeah, we signed him long term.
Woohoo! Thank you.
Yeah.
I entertained him most of the night.
Are you looking for a finder's fee or what do you like? I don't know. Okay. Councillor O'Toole has a new part-time gig, hockey scout. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. Something I wanted to ask, so I want to make sure we're not being too presumptuous or something. One of the proposals is to appoint a council member to the board as a voting member and to receive financials, things like that. But we don't know what else we're going to approve, whether we approve a loan or reduction in rent, something like that. Curious, can you tell me a little bit about that in terms of, is there discomfort with that if we give you guys less than we're considering today, or is that
I guess, we're coming to you today based on what we need, not as this is just extra cake, so to speak. So there's not going to be any hard feelings. Obviously, we understand how this works, and this is taxpayers' loans that we're going to be repaying. But in the same sense, we're not here to say no to anything. Our goal is to strengthen our bond with the city. Whatever that might look like is totally up to taxpayers, and you guys are the voice of taxpayers. So to say that it would ruin the relationship would be, I don't think you ever ruin a relationship in anything. With that being said, we haven't come asking for this because we don't need it. It's because we do need it, and it is something that is a lifeline for this franchise right now. So.
Councillor Thiessen?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. I think you might have already answered my question with your last statement, but I guess I'll take it a different route. If the council decided to approve the loan request, but charge rent, how would the Storm balance their books in paying rent to the city for being our main tenant at the Revolution Place? And be able to pay back the loan. Is that possible within the business plan right now?
So how I've worked it back, what we've requested today is actually factoring that rent rebate. So essentially, I'm saying a $200,000 cash flow investment from the city, and then the rent rebate for this last season that would happen would get us to a 1-to-1 working capital ratio, as we would say. So it kind of get us right on board where we could start with a sustainable, clean slate. So for this last season, we would need something just to assist for these next 3 months that are going to be our slowest months. Just with the sponsorship, it all kind of comes at the beginning of the year. But moving forward, with the projected $20,000 rent, we could for sure service the debt on that. And moving forward, it would be an annual conversation of saying, okay, how is the Storm doing? How is the sponsorship in the market in Grande Prairie? And what is the sustainable amount of rent? What I don't want to do is promise the world and then not be able to hit back on the rent. Our goal is to get to a point where we're sustainable fully, where we can pay fair market value on that rent. And I believe with this cash flow loan, we should be able to get there in 2 to 3 years.
Okay, now just thank you for that. Just in regards to the rent, it's my understanding that the rent is a bit higher for the Storm at Revolution Place, or at least it was, and hence we reduced the rates than other AJHL franchise cities. Can you speak to that and what your, I guess we get back to sustainability, if that happens. What would you foresee as a reasonable rent amount?
Yeah, for sure. And speaking with other AJHL franchises, and just noting across the league, within the AJHL and junior hockey actually all over, it's becoming more and more where this isn't a for-profit entity where we're making money hand over fist. This is essentially all over Canada. Investments with cities and franchises are happening where the rent is being subsidized. So with an actual number on that, talking to other franchises, 60,000 to 80,000 is kind of maybe an average, with some franchises being subsidized fully by the city for the rent, and others maybe paying higher. But I can't give you an actual detailed number, but that's kind of my best guess.
So I would just assume maybe like a $40,000 to $60,000 base rent is kind of a goal.
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
future?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Gentlemen, you sort of touched on the fact that the Storm is supported by an association, a not-for-profit association or club. And you also referenced that the members of that club have essentially put in about $350,000. So just to be really clear, what happens if the Storm runs a profit? Do those people then take that profit, I guess, on an ongoing basis?
Nope. So no, as a not-for-profit, no profits are ever paid out. Come the time where we are cash flowing and we are sustaining and we are paying rent, then absolutely, if there's extra cash that comes in, those loans will be repaid. Those are the same thing as the loans we're asking you for. Those have been given, and they deserve to be repaid down the line. The one nice thing is our members have agreed to postpone those loans in favor of the city loans. So essentially, they are the last people getting repaid on after the city of Grande Prairie. So, but yeah, like down the road, if we're cash flowing, the goal is to get those all paid back, and because that's they are the lifeline. Those member contributions are the lifeline that's kept us going, and in no way should those be frowned upon or looked down on. That's we can thank those for Storm hockey over these last 4 years.
Absolutely. And so just again, for greater clarity, what will the Storm be using the $20,000? There's some debts essentially that the Storm would like to clear off with suppliers. Can you just sort of speak to the nature of specifically what you'll be using the money for?
Sure. So for the cash flow investment that we're looking for the city is going to go to paying off some old debt. So essentially, as I said, back in 2015, what happened was we, with a reduction that we set, a 35% decrease in our ticket sales and our sponsorship, and our costs staying the same, we ran at a loss. Fortunately, we had some member contributions that we're able to fund through. And every year what happens is we generate enough cash till about January, and then all of a sudden we have to get more member contributions. So what we're going to do now is we have some outstanding payables owed to local businesses that we'd like to clear up, along with some high interest credit card debt. That's when Coach goes on the road, he has a credit card and he pays for the meals and the bus and the boys' hotel, and some CRA source deductions that need to be cleaned up. But it's all local, mainly local businesses for a large proponent of it, and current debts.
And so those that have loaned money to the organization, sort of not shareholders, that's an inappropriate term, so the members of the association that have loaned money have said, we're going to pay back local businesses first, the city second, and then after, and if and when we're cash flow positive at that point, that's when we'd consider seeing back some of our loans.
Yeah, 100%. So that's exactly how it's going to go. And I think that's what's owed. The city of Grande Prairie, the businesses are, they're the lifeline. So getting them paid back and clearing up some of this high interest credit card debt, it's like anything in life. We didn't have to, we wouldn't have done it, but it's easier said than done. So clearing that up and just managing that moving forward. With this cash flow investment, us starting on a clean state, we're sustainable for, based on the growth rates that we've recognized in this year and the past years, we are sustainable for the foreseeable future. So, and down the road, if we cash flow, then that will be paid, but not before the city of Grande Prairie.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Thiessen, you had one last?
One last question. Maybe it's a kind of a statement / question, but there's countless stories out there of people who win the lottery, and then they're back at work 6 months to a year later because they just blew it all. So a big bag of money falls out of the sky into the Storm's lap via the city of Grande Prairie. I really like what the Storm has been doing over the last year as far as community engagement and game experience. Would you guys take your foot off the gas, or would you push down even harder and try to drum up more fan support, become more community players? Is that part of the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Like our goal is our board of directors when we meet, it's to get better every single like the hockey club, right? We're in no way, even though this is a not-for-profit group, we are all business-minded people in that room who are looking to get better every single day and grow this organization. I mean, we want to get back to where we were as a AJHL franchise, as one of the premier franchises, and that's our goal. So in no way are we taking our foot off the pedal. If anything, this maybe provides a room for us to get even better. So I think that's kind of the positivity that comes from this. I think the additions of Eric, our business manager, and our strong relationship with the city is only going to kickstart this thing moving forward for the future. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So I don't see anybody else in the queue. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being here this evening to speak that item and answering our questions as asked. Certainly much appreciated. Thanks very much. Okay, so is there anybody else that wished to present to council on any community-related matter? I don't see anybody coming forward, and so I will remind the community that this opportunity exists at every regular city council meeting, so if anybody wishes to come forward, you certainly have that opportunity. We always love it if you call ahead of time, but it's absolutely not required. We always make that call at council, and if somebody decides they want to, they can absolutely get up and come and speak to us. But seeing that there was nobody coming forward, then we'll move on to the public hearings. We have one this evening, and that's item 6.1. Bylaw 1372, the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan, and Bylaw C 1237N, the Municipal Development Plan Amendment. I'd call this public hearing to order, and I'd look to administration for an introduction. There's somebody in there that's not administration. What's going on over there?
Thank you, Mayor Given. This presentation is in regards to the adoption of the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan. The ASP applies to an area in the city of Grande Prairie situated north of the Grande Prairie Airport and west of 116th Street. It is part of the 97 quarter section annexed in January 2016. The purpose of the ASP is to address the long-term planning and development of approximately 30 quarter sections of land. It is currently in use for agriculture, country residential, and recreation, as you can see on the map on the screen. Planning staff have completed 2 area structure plans to guide the development of the annexed land, Hughes Lake and Northern Lights ASP, and this is the next ASP, which includes approximately 30 quarter sections in the northwest section of the city. The RFP was issued and the consultant, ISL, was selected in the fall of 2017. The ASP scope of work included proposed general land uses, sequence of development, major road networks, general location of water, wastewater, and storm facilities, schools, parks, and environmental setbacks, and potential energy servicing alternatives. A comprehensive work plan involved 4 major phases, was developed to successfully engage both the internal and external stakeholders. The table on the screen there shows the breakdown of the 4 major phases of the task. The engagement strategy included separate landowner and public engagement sessions in December of 2017, March and October of 2018, and the draft ASP is also the result of a thorough technical review of relevant city servicing plans and environmental studies. The key themes and local priorities were developed from the feedback received during these open houses with the landowners and the public. Environmental protection, branding, land use, history, and nature are some of the key themes. Building upon the direction of the Municipal Development Plan and the key themes and local priorities, a complete community concept has been the underlying approach while developing this ASP. The complete community concept aims at creating neighborhoods that include a mix of land uses, while at the same time taking the natural features into consideration. Such an approach gives residents a sense of identity and reinforces place of unique character. And I'll pass it along to Dave.
Thank you, Mayor Given, members of council. What we're going to focus on with the balance of the presentation today is to talk about 6 key things: the sub areas that were developed, and the land use concept associated with that, the concept of neighborhood centers, the significant emphasis that's been placed on parks and open space, the overall infrastructure planning for the area. Also, given the size of the area and the length of time that this area is going to take to build out, there's a lot of emphasis placed on interim measures, both planning and engineering, and also the matters related to energy planning. The plan area was divided for planning purposes into 2 nodes, Area A and Area B, or 1 and 2, corresponding to the area north of the Highway 43 alignment, and the second area being south of the Highway 43 alignment, both areas basically being distinct nodes or neighborhoods. The overall land use concept, as you can see on the screen, is predominantly residential. To the red are 2 neighborhood centers, which would be the focal point for additional density, as well as commercial and public facilities. The green spaces, you can see the Bear Creek Corridor and major wetlands. The purple are future industrial areas, and the pink are future commercial nodes. The commercial areas are corresponding with high traffic corridors like 116th Street on the east side of the area, and on the west side of the area, adjacent to the future interchange, which is an extension of future commercial development that's proposed in the Hughes Lake area structure plan. Also, there are 2 existing recreational uses, Happy Trails and Country Roads, and they are continuing to be recognized as recreational uses into the future. We wanted to spend a little time in this plan talking about sort of what the long-term cumulative effects of development in this area are. You have to appreciate we're talking about 30 quarter sections, essentially doubling the size of the city in terms of population and land base. So we're talking about in excess of 500 hectares, net hectares of low density residential lands, potentially generating in excess of 11,000 dwellings and a total population of almost 53,000 people. So it's a significant area that we're planning for here. But also in terms of the employment effects, we've got 265 hectares plus or minus net hectares of employment land. That's the commercial and industrial lands. And we're anticipating a total employment generation of in excess of 10,000 jobs in this area. So very significant land base that we're dealing with. The residential industrial, the area is predominantly residential, as I mentioned. The industrial area, if you could, sorry, back up one more to the map, please. The industrial areas are proposed in the northeast portion of the quadrant of the plan area, north of the highway, east of the Bear Creek Corridor, and that's consistent with future industrial development proposed in the hamlet of Claremont, which is adjacent, as well as an employment node north of the bypass on the westerly portion. And the intent here is, again, with so much future population in the area, the intent of providing jobs close to where people live was an important consideration. Since we're looking at a long-term build-out, 50, 100 years, depending on which forecast you think about in terms of future city growth. Sorry, the next one. We've got the possibility of looking at land development in a very different way moving forward. Land development and neighborhoods may look very different than they do now. Just like neighborhoods that we're building now look very different from neighborhoods that were built 50 years ago or 75 years ago. So different housing styles. We're trying to make provision for innovative neighborhoods and different neighborhoods, more emphasis on green belts and greenways. Examples are, for example, reverse housing, where the front yard is actually opening onto green space as opposed to roadways, as an example of alternative models of housing development into the future. Neighborhood centers are a major focal point of this plan in the interest of sustainability and improving pedestrian or resident access to employment and other centers, reducing greenhouse gases and environmental footprints. We've provided a concept for what these neighborhood centers would look like or could look like, which emphasize increased density, localized commercial kind of Main Street plaza areas, also public services and government facilities, that kind of thing, in sort of central nodes within neighborhoods. Next, please. The Parks and Open Space Network, a significant emphasis on the Bear Creek corridor and the future extension of the Bear Creek Parks urban park system north of into this new area. And we're proposing a series of greenways through the neighborhoods that would provide connectivity between the park corridor, major wetland areas, and neighborhood parks and school sites. As a result of a significant amount of green space, there's flexibility in the plan for how that municipal reserve is allocated or collected and allocated, particularly as it relates to industrial versus residential applications. And to give a sense of how much population is going to be in these areas, we've made provision for 3 high school sites and 9 K-8 sites. So it's a significant investment in public open space in this area. And again, because we're essentially doubling the residential footprint of the city. The plan shows some illustrations of what some of these greenways could look like. Again, conceptually, the whole idea is we're trying to create complete neighborhoods, complete communities through investments in open space and so on. And also just, we're not going to spend a lot of time in terms of the infrastructure side, but the transportation network is particularly challenging in this area because of the highway and the creek. Normally the provision would be for an arterial roadway about every mile, you know, in a grid. We can't do that in this area because of those obstacles or opportunities, depending on your perspective. So we've got we're in a situation here where there's going to be a lot more emphasis on beefed up collector roadways as opposed to arterial roadways, which is basically an approach that's consistent with the transportation master plan that city engineering is currently working on. And I'll turn it over to Wally.
Thank you, Dave and Alison. As mentioned before, the draft ASP is a very long range and a high level plan that is intended to guide the development of the plan area over the next 25 to 50 years. For that reason, the ASP includes very flexible policies that allows the following: the continuation of the existing uses, and also the policies allow lay the foundation for their integration in the future into the envisioned future land uses. Other policies enable waiving the requirement for the outline plan or the OP before the subdivision of up to a maximum of 6 lots in residentially designated areas. So if I go back to the land use map, we are talking about the areas that are in yellow here, that we can accommodate up to 6 subdivision of 6 lots before the preparation of an OB, provided that a shadow plan is submitted. Also, the ASP takes into account that the completion of Highway 43 may result in development applications before municipal servicing such as water and sewage water are extended. Therefore, options for interim servicing, by this I mean something like on-site sewage or septic tanks, could be accommodated. Also, perhaps one of the main features of the ASP is the integration of urban planning and energy planning by exploring the opportunities for improving efficiency in energy consumption and environmental design. I would like to emphasize that the policies related to the energy component and the environmental design are aspirational and not prescriptive. And that investigating them at this stage, which is the ASP stage, was meant to help applicants in the future at the OP stage to tap into these potentials, especially for areas containing the two neighborhood centers. If I go back, yeah, because as we see, the vision is for the centers is to have mix of uses and also high density. So environmental efficiency could be accomplished if we tap into some of the potentials. Furthermore, the ASP promotes the adoption of principle of leadership in energy and environmental design for the neighborhood developments, which are called LEAD-ND. LEAD-ND is the first lead system to look at the neighborhood as a whole instead of just looking at each individual building. That could be accomplished by using, for example, the location, the design, and also connecting transportation to neighborhoods. I would like here to mention that because of the proposed policies in the ASP, some amendments in the municipal development plan needs to be done at the same time. Specifically speaking, some proposed uses, especially the one for the industrial uses on close to the northeast, and the one for the industrial uses close to the future highway, needed to be changed in the MDB map so that it will be in line with the proposed ASP. Another change that we are proposing in the MDB is related to the policy that enables the subdivision of up to 6 lots before the preparation of an OB, provided that they are residentially designated in the ASP. To summarize, the draft ASP establishes the land uses and provides a framework for future development and connecting and the transportation system by facilitating the development of alternative energy and energy efficient designs. In light of this, administration is recommending the approval of the proposed ASP and the associated MDB amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have an opportunity for questions for administration before we open for public presentations. Councillor Bressi.
Great, thank you. Two questions for now is one, talking about the energy initiatives, certification, district heat, all that. I was excited to see that. I love that we're talking and we're planning for the future. I love that we're thinking about things that could be both good for the environment, but also potentially great for the bottom line of the people that are building out here. So that's exciting. At the same time, I just want to learn a little bit more about how prescriptive this is in terms of, is this more an aspirational document in those lines, or are there actual requirements, additional requirements will be put on people based on this?
To you, Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned during the presentation, they are not prescriptive, they're aspirational. Taking into consideration that the build out of the whole ASP might take even more than 50 years. So at that time, bylaws will change, building code specifically speaking will change. As far as we know from our energy consultant, by 2030, there might be a nationwide change in terms of energy code that will require all housing units to be net zero. And this has been happening gradually, but his anticipation by 2030, which will be before, I would say, even 10% of the area is built.
Well, like I said, I'm excited to see those. Just last week, I took a tour of the East Village in Calgary, which is very different than this development will ever be. At the same time, a lot of it was made possible by district energy, and a lot of, especially the nonprofit work going on there, is really being stimulated right now by that. So excited to see us thinking about that, and I'm excited to see where that goes in our city. One other question for you is, as I was reading this, something I was kind of surprised about was there's a lot of provision made for school sites. There's a lot of provision made for recreational things, but I don't really see much provision made for indoor year-round recreational or cultural facilities. So wondering, am I missing something here, or was that considered, or?
Yes, Councillor Bressi. Yeah, I guess it's not explicitly stated, but it is implied for two reasons. First of all, the concept of the neighborhood centers. A lot of civic facilities, which could include recreation facilities, are kind of intended for that area. Also, we're consistent with the city's parks and recreation master plans, which put a lot of emphasis on twinning going forward high schools and recreation facilities. The CKC is sort of the biggest example of that, or the Dave Barr site, where you've got schools and rec facilities. So the intent is that these the high school sites, which are technically regional park facilities, are intended to accommodate facilities like you're talking about, like indoor soccer or arenas or what have you, libraries, that kind of thing.
If I may just ask you questions about this, just to make sure I understand that a little bit more. If I really appreciate that intent, and I love the idea of these combined with things, but how easy, or do we have the ability, if something's designated a school site in here, to say, sorry, we're actually not putting it, sorry, school boards, we're actually not going to put a school site here. You guys don't need a new school or whatever. We just want a rec facility. We're going to go ahead and do just a strict rec facility on a school site. Do we have that ability if we need that further down the road?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, Councillor Bressi, you do. The school sites are allocated. They're basically titled to the city or the municipality when they're created. So it is city land. And the allocation of those sites and the use of those sites is negotiated with the school divisions, basically through the scores agreement and so on. So there is a process for identifying those facilities. Obviously, if there was a situation where, 30 years down the road or whatever, when one of these sites came into play, and that discussion is had, that's when that would kind of be determined. But at this point, we've identified them primarily as school sites simply based on the student generation that we're forecasting. But as I say, these sites are large enough that they're intended to be able to accommodate both, either in an integrated building or at least on a shared site.
And then kind of my last question along this line, and then I'm done for now anyways, is looking at these neighborhood centers, you mentioned those in the context of this conversation. When I was reading this, I just kind of assumed that the vision of those was private, commercial, higher density, residential, not actually any public facilities. So or maybe we don't even talk about the intent of cash in lieu at this stage, but land versus cash in lieu, but is the intent to take some land in these neighborhood centers for public use, or is that undefined for now, or?
Downing?
Through the chair. When we've figured out the municipal reserve for this plan area, it looks like it's going to be extremely tight to cover the needs for school sites and for municipal reserve along the Bear Creek corridor. I think we're likely going to be in a position where we're possibly going to have to be buying land for municipal needs in addition to the 10%. So we're not proposing cash in lieu because we feel that there's definitely a need to use all of the land that the area has for the municipal needs.
So, and then just make sure I'm understanding then, is basically the way it is right now, we'd be taking our 10% land just for school sites, and if we wanted more in the neighborhood centers, we'd probably have to purchase that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wouldn't say that exactly, but I would say that the majority of it is going to be used up with schools and with municipal reserve for increasing the size of the Bear Creek corridor. And so municipal park space might be an issue when we get to the outline plan stage for the way that the city wants to ensure that they get the amount that they want.
Awesome.
So, Mr. Mayor, one point to add, yes, we will have a tight ability to take MR, but we still were able to ensure that some gain spaces, if I go back to the map, I don't know if I can show it. So I don't know, I know it's very small, but within those two centers, you could tell that there's gain spaces connecting them to the Bear Creek to the east and also to the west of the plan area. So that's the minimum we can ensure. However, more details would be needed at the outline stage. But that being said, we recognize that we need a lot of schools in the whole area, and a lot of the MR might be taken up by the school needs. And the way we do it by 20.2% of the estimated population will be of school age. And we have a total of 52,000 or a little bit more. That's why the school needs are bigger than what we usually have before, because it's a huge area to begin with. We're talking about over 2,000 hectares of land. That's why it's massive. And that's why we had a table showing the numbers at the beginning during Dave's presentation to just give you an idea of the scale, how big it is.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Just speaking of scale, appreciating that council has actually probably seen more of what we're calling super ASPs than they have of normal ASPs over the start of this term. So can anybody on administration contrast the scale of this ASP to what might be a more typical scale that we would see in terms of number of quarter sections? Mr. McRae?
Yes, Your Worship. It's really, what we're looking at here with this area structure plan is approximately 31 quarter sections. The last private area structure plan that we did for Kensington was 1.5 quarter sections. Arbor Hills was about 4 quarter sections. Bear Creek Highlands, 4 quarter sections. That in the past has been kind of the ranges for kind of 1 up to maybe 4 or 6. So we're sitting at roughly 5 times bigger than kind of the biggest conventional ASP prior to, say, Hughes Lake or Northern Lights.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, it just sort of helps to get an order of magnitude scale. I see Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, and thank you very much for the hard work that you put into developing this. Actually, I was quite impressed. I wrote down aspirational yet tangible creative community building design that I saw just in the small parts. Like, I like the fact that the houses are hopefully intended to be their own little community centers by facing each other. It's a design touch that I think more and more municipalities are learning about and trying to integrate into their systems. So my question is, just in regards to the green spaces as well, and the potential to maybe have to purchase land for MR, does the plan incorporate how many wetland areas are protected and then would be exempt from any sort of purchase or requirement to purchase land for MR?
Ms. Downing?
Through the Mayor. There is policies in here about what is environmental reserve, and the policies are very specific about there being a setback of at least 15 meters from the top of bank from the Bear Creek corridor, which is in excess of the actual wetland area or riparian area into area that serves to protect water from pollution. And anything at the time of subdivision that is deemed as wetland will be protected under environmental reserve policies. Wetlands have been identified through the plan. However, at the time of the planning, of the outline plan, is when the biophysical work will have to be done to determine exactly what the wetland area is. But the policies in place in the document talk about not only protecting that wetland or riparian area, but protecting in excess of at least 15 meters of that area.
Awesome. No, that's really great to hear, especially for how I bend. One just final comment it is referenced here in the last part of it, but one of the main strengths of the draft ASP is that it provides a framework for the development of a diverse, connected, and sustainable neighborhoods, and also facilitates the development of alternative energy and creates room for that for future developments as codes change. So I wanted to thank you guys for being forward-thinking and putting together a plan that I think is going to work for future generations inside of this area structure plan. And I don't think the goal is too aspirational to be a net zero, because I do believe that's the way we're going. So thank you very much. I'd be more than happy to read these motions for the ASP.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thiessen. We're actually going to let other council members ask their questions, then we're going to let the public present, and then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll move on to motions arising. So, but I appreciate the offer. Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Minhas, I see that you're in the queue.
Thank you, Mayor Will Gibbon. Thank you very much for the administration. You guys worked very hard to present this one, because that was the biggest one I think ever happened in Grande Prairie, doubling the population almost, if it grows. My question is, when you call the industrial area, what that mean? The heavy industry in that part of it, and or the light industry, or just commercial part of the industrial area that
Mr. McRae?
you mentioned.
Yeah, Councillor Minhas through the chair. It's sort of we haven't specified heavy versus light versus kind of general industrial. We've just sort of identified them as industrial areas. We've got some policy language that talks about kind of lighter industrial, business industrial, kind of around the perimeter of those areas where they're adjacent to residential uses or park space, that kind of thing. And then more internal would be kind of a conventional industrial park setting, like, you know, the Richmond Industrial Park or any other sort of conventional industrial park. We're not envisioning any heavy industrial in these areas, you know, smokestacks, that kind of thing. Those have been dealt with by the city in other policy areas. So it's really basically conventional industrial park development for those areas.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minhas. I had one question. You mentioned the in-term development rights that landowners would have without having to do an outline plan. And I think I heard you mention that they could do up to 6 lots before having to move to an outline plan. How does that compare with land that is identified in the IDP as long-term growth area for the city? So there are some relatively limited development rights on land that is currently in the county, but is identified for future city growth. And I just wanted to get a sense of, I mean, ultimately whether it's better to be in the land that was annexed to the city and what you could do with it for development today without having to do an outline plan, or whether it would be, you know, what's the flexibility in that area that remains in the county. Ms. Downing?
Thank you. Through the mayor, or to the mayor directly. The area in the southwest of the city allows 30 acres per quarter section before an outline plan. The 6 lots before an outline plan would be in excess of that. There's specific policies about it, whether it's commercial or industrial in those areas as well. And I would certainly say that the policies that we're putting in here for allowing that interim development are greater allowances than we would allow in the long-term annexation area, and greater than was allowed in the period before the city annexed the land.
Okay, thanks very much. I see Councillor O'Toole.
I couldn't let Chris speak all by himself tonight, so I got a couple of questions. I do like the forward thinking of changing the design. I think that's a great thing. I've got 2 questions. They're going through a tour with that after the annexation. I think we all seen some oil field gas wells and some pump jacks in those areas. Is there a game plan to sort of eliminate them or hide them to the general public? And also, I know council at one time was looking at making some estate housing, so I am wondering if there was some acreage settings that would be encompassed in this as well.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole, through the chair. With regard to the first matter, the oil field facilities, in this plan area, there's relatively limited. I think there's only 1 well site. It was more prevalent in Hughes Lake to the west.
Right. Okay.
But in this area, I think there's only 1, and I think it's abandoned, to be honest.
Perfect.
But Alberta Energy Regulator guidelines have specific standards for the addressing of those sites. For an existing well site, it's 100, if it's not sour, is 100-meter setback from the wellhead for residential. And for an abandoned well site, it's a 5-meter setback from the wellhead for and providing access basically for maintenance. So those are all dealt with at later stages through outline plan, but the standards are in place for dealing with those facilities, and they are not a significant issue in this plan area, but definitely Hughes Lake, that was far more prevalent.
Right.
With regard to your second question, and actually I'm going to have to ask you to repeat it.
I was just wondering if there's going to be larger lots.
Oh, the acreage, yes.
And not necessarily acreage, maybe misspoke there, but larger lots, maybe we can see estate homes in there type thing, and higher end homes.
The plan does not exclude that possibility. We realize that this is a long-term play in this area, and given the amount of land. And also there's an issue with trying to level the playing field with the county in terms of providing some similar product that you see in the rural area, service to state development, assuming the numbers work, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, there's nothing in this plan that would prevent that from occurring. It would just be a matter, again, addressed in individual outline plans where it makes sense to do that. But in this plan, we didn't specifically address it, but it's certainly not excluded.
Thank you very much for your detailed explanation. Thank you.
Councillor Bressy.
Thank you. 2 more questions. Something that kind of surprised me when I saw the plan was in the area south of the highway. There's residential areas butting right up against the highway instead of there being a buffer of industrial the whole way. I was curious, was there any thinking of making that industrial everywhere along the highway? And what's the design standards of that highway in terms of muffling noise and things like that for that industrial or for that residential area?
Councillor Bressy, again through the chair, there's a challenge with buffering along the highway with industrial, and that's the whole issue of access. Because highway access is limited to the 2 interchange locations, the current roundabout location on 16th, and then the future interchange at what would eventually be 132nd Avenue. It's very difficult to get to sort of have linear industrial development in that context. So we deliberately tried to avoid that. And so the best place where we had an industrial node was sort of on the northwest corner, abutting the highway. With regard to the buffering between the highway and and future residential development, we can only presume, based on our current awareness, for example, in the county, the development at Westlake near 4 Mile Corner, basically it's berming and fencing to provide that buffer, and I would presume that a similar treatment would be used further along as these neighborhoods build out. And that would be an issue of basically developer working with transportation in the city to figure out how to best do that long term.
So, and then another concern I've got 2 concerns with it. One is noise, but in my opinion, that's more a buyer beware. If you buy next to a highway, oh well. And if your backyard's noisy, but also concern I've got is dangerous goods that might be on that highway. Was there any consultation or any talk to the fire department or others who could give an opinion on whether or not residential that close to the highway is something we should be concerned about?
Through the chair, actually, that issue was never specifically raised as far as I'm aware. The fact of the matter is, it's a highway and it's part of the Canamex corridor, so it is what it is. I would suggest that, again, based on our current knowledge, you've got, again, with Westlake, a very affluent neighborhood, hasn't seemed to be an issue, obviously. Otherwise, that development wouldn't have been as successful as it was. So I think it's just a case of, as development proceeds, it's just a reality of the situation, and that through design and managing future traffic operations, it's just would have to be dealt with on an as-need basis. But that's kind of the best I can do at this point with that response.
And then kind of something that got me thinking about was there any talk or discussion about, given this plan, if it developed like this, and maybe we're just not at this point to look this detailed yet, but given current fire standards that we have in the city, would there be a need for another fire station to accommodate the development in this area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, for sure there will be a need at some point. Assuming that we have the full build-out, there will be a need. But again, it depends on how fast the build-out goes on. So that might be like 20 years, 25 years from now. Okay. So it's not something that's going to happen immediately. And if it happens, the best location for it will be somewhere close to the neighborhood centers. And we have some regulation for the neighborhood center that mentioned basically civic building without detailing what the civic building might be. Thank you.
And then is that a valid use of municipal reserve that we're taking for schools, or can that only be for recreational and school use?
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Bressy, public or community facilities like fire halls and that kind of thing are not MR eligible. They are not an eligible use. However, those types of facilities can be located on lands that are designated as community reserve, which are essentially surplus school sites that are then sort of decommissioned. So there is that opportunity, but like you have with the current 3 fire halls, is if you need a fire hall, you're going to have to acquire the land to accommodate it. And given the size of this area, I wouldn't be surprised if there's 2 or even potentially 3 fire halls in this area between Hughes Lake and Bear Creek North, just because of the magnitude of the area.
Thank you.
Councilor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I think we're really talking this one to death because we're going 50 years in potentially. But just a comment and question. If the one abandoned well site or the one well site isn't a sour well site, does that provide us an opportunity to achieve the aspirational goals through potential geothermal projects that wouldn't require a lot of wires to be put underground and into the area, and we can build from the center?
I can speak to that. Okay. Well, I dealt a lot with the the energy consultant, so it could be a potential. However, the way he was talking about the whole study, and I hope you had time to go over it, the idea was the best potential for the whole area would be tapping into the 2 lakes.
Yes.
That from his point of view, based on the recent big projects in the States, mentioning the one in Nashville and the one in Chicago, that seemed to be the most cost-effective one, tapping into water. However, the potential of the geothermal is still there if it's done on a bigger scale. If it's done on a house per house, it wouldn't work.
Oh, of course, yeah. No, I would talk about a larger generation station.
Potentially, yes. However, at the time of actually working on OP and considering all the factors based on what we know, the cheaper option will be using the 2 lakes. That might be a more cost-effective option, is the district heating through the 2 lakes close by.
Okay.
And going back to Dave, it's only 1 well, so the other ones, we already have 7 that are decommissioned. So if this is something that somebody would like to look into in the future, there might be a potential to see if they could be used for geothermal at the OP stage. So we have lots of potential for energy, alternative energy. We hope that this will materialize once we start seeing development.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Cal. So I had one last question just with respect to the transportation network. In the southeast corner, there appear to be 3 sort of arrows that terminate in 1 quarter section outside of the plan. And so I was just, as I was looking at that, I was curious whether that starts to create a significant traffic impact or a bottleneck at that point if there's that much of the 2 neighborhoods and potentially the far northwest area essentially flowing directly into that sort of single quarter section. So can you speak to me about what the impact of all of that traffic heading that direction will be and how that's accommodated?
I guess, Your Worship, only kind of anecdotally, that those connections are basically consistent with existing connections that are in the Bear Creek Highlands area structure plan that was produced back in about 2006 to 6 or 7. And again, in my original comments, I talked about one of the challenges of this transportation network is because of the creek and the highway, the opportunity to have the conventional arterial grid is kind of compromised. So 132nd Avenue is really, on the southeast portion, really the only way out. And so all traffic is, unless there's another crossing of the creek connecting with 116th Street sometime in the long-term future, 132nd is going to be carrying the brunt of that traffic. In terms of what that impact is, I think it's safe to say that the draft transportation master plan that's currently being looked at would be addressing that, because they're looking at these new ASP areas as part of that future network. So I think that's where the real answers will come.
But so at this stage, conceptually at least, this entire sort of northwest area will funnel down to the 116th, 132nd Street, sorry, 132nd Avenue, 116th Street area. Is that correct?
For the most part, in that direction, yes.
Yeah.
on the other side, it would be connecting more towards, it would be connecting out again to the highway and coming around or through Hughes Lake at, I think it's 140th Street, west of the airport.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I don't see anybody else in the queue, and so we must have talked ourselves out on that one. Councillor Thiessen, did you have something additional before we went on to public presentations?
Sorry, I pushed the button by accident. I thought I was clearing my mic.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So we'll move on to the public hearing. I'll open up for presentation submissions from any members of the public that might be here to make a representation with respect to the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan and the associated Municipal Development Plan Amendment. Was there anybody here that wished to speak to this plan? Is there anybody that was here this evening intending to speak to the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan? I'm not seeing anybody. Well, I saw somebody flinch. It was like taunting me. Okay, okay. That's just to get the chair of the meeting like excited. It doesn't look like there's anybody coming forward. I'll ask one last time. Is there anybody that wishes to speak to the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan? Seeing none, then I would close the public hearing and I would move on to business arising. Councillor, Councillor Bressie.
Well, I would move that council give first reading to bylaw C-1372, being a bylaw to adopt the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. And for those wondering, Councillor Bressie was fastest on the draw. So it was almost like he won the face-off there to get to make that motion. And so this is a motion for first reading. I will call for the vote on first reading. Please vote. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Bressie, we move on to second reading.
I would move that council give second reading to bylaw C-1372.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. So a motion for second reading, open for discussion and debate. Is there any discussion and debate on second reading of bylaw C-1372, which is the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan? Seeing none, it looks like council had all their questions answered, and I would call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Bressie?
I would move that council have third reading of bylaw C-1372 at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. As you might have noticed by the intonation, this is a motion to have third and final reading. It isn't actually third and final reading. In order for us to have all three readings of a bylaw at the same meeting, we have to have this motion to have third reading. And this motion must pass unanimously. If it doesn't pass unanimously, then that final reading would come back at our subsequent council meeting. Is there any discussion or debate as to the merits of having third and final reading? Seeing nobody ringing in, I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. And that motion carries, so we can have third and final reading. Councillor Bressie?
Great. I would move that we give third reading to bylaw C-1372, being a bylaw to adopt the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan. And this speaks to us because somebody should if we're not going to debate it. I'm excited to see this plan. I've already talked about how I'm excited to see some aspirational planning going on in terms of saying some vision of what we can look at for neighborhoods. I already mentioned that environmentally, but also with greenways, with community centers, making walkable, complete communities. I really love that. I've been asking a few people that develop industrial land since I got on council, what do we need to do to attract industrial development? And the number one thing they've said is give us predictability. And so this accomplishes that with the industrial zones in here. They know now that we're welcome to their development here. And accomplishes that along with some great residential areas. So I'd urge council to vote in favor of this.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate? I'll just say that one thing that I really appreciate about the plan, first off, is its large size. That council needs to know that this is somewhat unique in terms of the scale that we're dealing with here. And recognizing that, I really appreciate the work that administration and the team went to provide some interim development options. Had we gone ahead with something of this scale and basically said it's going to be built to a fully urban city standard of today, we would absolutely be missing the mark. And so I really appreciate the fact that administration and the team said, so what can we do over the next number of years to be able to support ongoing development for the landowners that are there and get a good result for the city over the long period of time. And so I appreciate that flexibility being built into the plan. And hopefully that turns some people's eyes towards this area of the city that is really ready and will be open for development, especially when the new highway opens next summer. So kudos to the administrative team that put that in there. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so we'll call for the vote on third and final reading. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Now we need first reading for the Municipal Development Plan Amendment, and I'll go to Councillor Thiessen.
I still got in the queue, didn't I? I would move that council give first reading to bylaw C-1237N, being an amendment to the Municipal Development Plan.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. So as with before, no discussion or debate on first reading. I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that council give second reading to bylaw C-1237N.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Any discussion or debate with respect to second reading of the Municipal Development Plan Amendment? Seeing none, I guess I would just sort of acknowledge in terms of the hierarchy of the plans, what this basically does is change the city's top overall planning document to conform with the Bear Creek North Area Structure Plan that we just passed. So we're basically saying that the city's overall municipal development plan now sort of links up with this plan that we just passed, which is a greater level of detail. I don't see anybody else ringing in, so we'll call for the vote on second reading. Please vote. That motion carries. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that council have third reading at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. You all heard my spiel before about having third reading, so I will call for the vote on this motion to have third and final reading at this meeting. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I've already gushed like a giddy school child on the verge of summer vacation over this ASP. I don't think anything more needs to be said. I think Council's deliberation and comments on this, as well as my own. And once again, kudos to the administration team and partners for putting together such a thoughtful future visioning plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Motion for third and final reading. Is there any discussion or debate?
I don't think I actually made that third and final reading, did I? Just to be clear, I would move that council give third reading to bylaw C-1237N.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Any discussion or debate on third and final reading? Seeing none, please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. That handles all of our public hearing business and would move us on in our agenda. We had no items of unfinished business, but we do have our additional item under reports, item 8.1, leave of absence, and variance to policy 401. We have somebody from administration to introduce the topic briefly. Look to our acting city manager.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So it's a request from our fire department for council to consider to approve the requested variance to policy 401 and permit, if successfully elected, the employee in question to initiate the requested leave of absence. So it's one of our fire captains who is interested in taking a leave of absence for a period of time to participate in the provincial election that's upcoming.
Okay, thanks very much. And just to be clear, the requested leave of absence would only be utilized in should they be successfully elected. It wouldn't be for use to campaign.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So is there somebody that would be prepared to make a motion on this item? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'd move the council. I'd move the council approve the requested variance to policy 401 and permit, if successfully elected, the employee to initiate the requested leave of absence. Just a few things to speak to this is my understanding is the way that the firefighting works in terms of union contracts is if an employee leaves and comes back to the organization, they have to start at the complete bottom again. So it's not like other jobs where if somebody leaves and comes back in a few years, they can apply to the same organization and hope to get a similar job they had, or even go to an organization elsewhere in the province and ask for a job. No matter where they have to go, they have to start at the bottom again. And that could be a very big hardship on the employee. Obviously, when you've got years or decades in, starting at the bottom is a hardship on them. But maybe more relevant to us, that's also a hardship on the organization in terms of we've got a highly trained individual with a lot of training And if this person comes back who's been an asset to our organization, we want to be able to utilize all that training that we've invested a lot of time and money into giving him. So I really do believe in, obviously, as an elected member of council, I believe in the calling of civil service and of representing people. And at the same time, I want to make sure that when that period of time comes to end, if it does, that somebody's able to continue to be a contributing member of our community organization. So I'd urge council to support this.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. So that motion to approve the variance. Is there any discussion or debate? I don't see anybody ringing in, so I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And I think that takes us into committee business. And our first item is item 9.1, the Community Living Committee meeting. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that council approve the minutes of the Community Living Committee meeting held Tuesday, January 15th, 2019, as presented.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. Is there any discussion or debate about those minutes? Any errors or omissions that we need to correct? Seeing nobody ring in, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And that takes us to item 9.1. And Councillor Thiessen, before you start with that, we did have a couple of council members who, on contingency, had made a formal request to be able to call into this evening's meeting. And so Councillor Clayton and Councillor Plott had made that request in accordance with our procedure bylaw. And I think we had heard at least one or both of them on the line. So I'll just check to see before we get started. Councillor Clayton, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
Councillor Plott, are you there?
Yes, I am, Mayor Given.
Okay, thanks very much. And so for both of you that are on the line, perhaps if you could just keep your lines on mute, I will make sure to give you an opportunity to enter into the discussion debate and obviously to cast your votes verbally. But just while we're having the discussion in the room, it's probably helpful if you could have your phones on mute. And so we'll move to Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. So really it's one item of business, but many items of business. So I'm just going to present it as the stopgaps here as one at a time. So I would move that council approve a $0 rent for the 2018-19 season with all service fees to remain with the city, and further a $20,000 base rent for the 2019-2020 season.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. And so, so the intent is to deal with sort of each of the major sections as their own motion. Okay.
For sure.
And so for those council members on the line, we'll give you an opportunity to discuss on each of these. So we have heard Councillor Thiessen's motion with respect to the $0 rent for the 2018-2019 season and the base rent for the upcoming 2019-2020 season. Is there any discussion or debate from council members here in the room? I'll look first to the council members in the room in my little control panel here. I see Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, and I do support this this motion. I think this is a good thing, and I'll look forward to being here for many years to come.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I see Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. It's been a really hard topic for me to think through. I really do appreciate the storm and what they bring to our community. I appreciate the sense of community spirit they give. I shared a committee meeting when I thought about moving to Grande Prairie. Didn't even know where it was. A bunch of people who also didn't know where it was asked, do they have a hockey team? And that's their assessment of whether a real city or not. So I get the sense of community pride a hockey team brings. I love to see the storm out in the community. Also love to see the finances of it, both in terms of supporting local businesses, but also helping with Revolution's place. So I really do want to see us support this team and see them sustainable. I've really struggled with what kind of sport is appropriate. And it's been interesting to talk to people in the community where I haven't really talked to people who want them completely out. I also haven't talked to people who are really comfortable giving everything that was asked for. So this is a tough conversation we're going to have. I think when it comes to this one, I'm really comfortable with reduced rents. I don't think I'm comfortable with giving zero rent. So I'm going to move an amendment. And the amendment I'd move is that council approve a $10,000 rent for the 2018-19 season and a $20,000 rent for the 2019-2020 season.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. So Councillor Bressie has made an amendment to Councillor Thiessen's motion. And so we'll have discussion and debate on the amendment, on Councillor Bressy's amendment. Is there anybody in the count? Maybe I'll start first with those that are on the line, actually, in this case. Councillor Bressy, as you heard, has made an amendment to recognize rent of $10,000 in 2018-19 and $20,000 in 2019-2020. Councillor Clayton, did you wish to discuss that, debate that amendment?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Given. In regards to the amendments, I can appreciate where Councillor Bressy is going there. However, the numbers that this organization has put together are not guesstimates. They've ran numbers for a long time based on their business model and what they think is reasonable. And even tonight it was stated that they've gone through this a long time and they don't want to set themselves up for failure. By putting on an amount of $10,000, they haven't run the financials based on that. And you're putting them in a position where they potentially will be in debt again after this year. Things run very tightly in organizations that are sport-based, and $10,000, if it was an option that they thought they could survive on that rent, they would have brought that forward. So I don't support the amendment.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Palat, would you care to speak to Councillor Bressy's amendment?
Yes, Mayor Gibbon. I wouldn't be able to support the motion. I guess part of me is I know we're trying to do these in buckets, and I can appreciate we're trying to do buckets of deal with this one and then the loan and all the different things. But you know, if we get to a point where we're giving a loan and then we're going to turn around and charge them, I think we're kind of, it's just, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me to charge them. If the whole hope is to make this organization work and successful, I think we're partnering with them. That's the intent here. So I wouldn't be able to support that motion.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Palat and Councillor Clayton. I'll look now to council members in the room on Councillor Bressy's motion. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I appreciate the intent of Councillor Bressy. I think I mentioned it at committee meeting, like if we end up giving a loan and zero-base rent, we're essentially paying back our own loan over the course of this time. But I can't support this motion for what's already been mentioned by Councillors Clayton and Palat. I'm more in favor of incremental increases to the rent as a Grande Prairie Storm find their feet. And right now, I don't want to pull the rug out of them before they start finding their ground. So for that, I can't support the motion. But thank you, Councillor Bressy, for at least trying.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be supporting this motion. I truly believe that the Storm have an opportunity to change things around a little bit. They have in the past, this year and last year. And I think that if this does not pass, I may come up with another amendment as well. So thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Yep, Councillor Bressy will give you that opportunity. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so we'll go to Councillor Bressy to close. Councillor Bressy.
Before I do, I really do appreciate Councillor Clayton's mention about cash flow. So a question for management. When would we expect this rent, if we did charge them rent this season, when would we expect that rent to be paid?
Scott, go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair. So far to date, for the current season, $29,200 has been retained in rent. So we actually have those funds now. So that's your answer.
Gotcha. So essentially, if we approve $0 rent, then there'd be that money going back to them right now is what would happen.
That's correct.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I still think that I still hope the council will vote in favor of this motion. I point out there's the point of we're loaning money to bring it back to ourselves. At the same time, I'd point out that the net cost, and that's assuming we even approve the loan. I point out if we do approve the loan and we do approve this rent reduction, it's still $10,000 more at the end of the loan period that the city has than we would have had otherwise. So I don't really buy that. I hope the council support this. I know if this amendment passes, then the motion is amended. It's a very easy yes for me. I honestly have no idea right now how I'll vote if this amendment doesn't pass.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressy. I don't see anybody else in the queue, and that was to close. And so we'll call for the vote on Councillor Bressy's amendment, which essentially would have the effect of recognizing a $10,000 rent for the 2018-2019 season. If my memory is correct, it didn't touch the amount recommended for 2019-2020. Okay, so call for the vote on Councillor Bressy's amendment to reflect $10,000 in rent for the 2018-2019 season. Please vote. Okay, so I have my votes entered here in the room. First, I'll go to Councillor Clayton on the line. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote on Councillor Bressy's motion, amendment?
Against.
Okay, Councillor Clayton is against. Councillor Palat, how do you vote?
No.
Okay, so we have 2 noes on the line, and I'll display the results in the council chamber. And so that would make 5 noes and 2 in support. So that amendment does not pass. And we'll move back to Councillor Thiessen's main motion. Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Given, I'd like to try another amendment. I would like to keep the 0 costs for this year and a $10,000 base rate for the following year.
Okay, thanks very much.
Instead of the $20,000.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. So Councillor O'Toole is making an amendment to recognize, rather than a $20,000 base rent in 2019-2020, a $10,000 base rent in 2019-2020.
If I could speak on that?
O'Toole, by all means.
I feel that we got an opportunity here to help a sporting club get their feet on the ground, or skates on the ice, you might say, and be competitive. And the little bit of money that we can save them here and there, it would be an advantage to our community and advantage to the team. So we just found out today we hired a guy. We got a guy signed up from Red Deer, and so we do have economic impact in the community. And their parents will be coming here quite often, and the young fellow has to stay somewhere and do his schoolwork and all that. So we're getting people, and I think this would be an encouraging thing to do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. I will first go to the council members that are on the line. Councillor Palat, do you wish to care to speak to Councillor O'Toole's amendment, which would reduce the rent for 2019-2020 to $10,000 from its current recommended amount of $20,000? Councillor Palat, do you wish to speak to that amendment?
No, thanks, Mayor Given.
Okay. Councillor Clayton, do you wish to speak to that amendment?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor Given. I can't support this amendment. I think that although it's a nice sort of piece to have for the storm, however, I have complete faith in the volunteer board committee members that they are smart business people. If they needed that rent reduced for next season, they would have asked for it. And so I think it's not in good operation for us to put our facility at a potential net loss revenue of an additional $10,000 when the organization didn't ask for it. So I can't support that amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. We'll move to council members in the room on Councillor O'Toole's amendment. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Obviously, I'm swayable, as we saw for the last vote, but in light of our Revolution Places managers saying that we've already collected close to $30,000 worth of rent, despite the fact that the storm are in dire straits, I can't support this motion because it appears that they do have enough money at least to be held in potential collateral. I don't know if this does actually a lot of good. I'd like to see us get to a reasonable rent rate and pay that back and create revenue for the city. And as Councillor Clayton said, I don't want to run the Revolution Place at a loss, but I do feel like we are already helping the storm with this reduced rate as it is. So I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I don't see anybody else in the queue on this amendment, and so I will first go to the council members on the phone and ask how they would vote on Councillor O'Toole's amendment to recognize $10,000 base rent in the 2019-2020 season. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
Against.
Okay, and Councillor Palat, how do you vote?
Against or no?
Okay, so I have 2 in opposition. I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. And that motion is 5 against and 2 in support, so that motion does not carry. So we are back to Councillor Thiessen's original motion. Councillor Thiessen, do you wish to close on your original motion, or?
No, I think we've talked this one to death.
Okay. Councillor Clayton or Councillor Palat, do you wish to speak to Councillor Thiessen's original motion with respect to rent?
I'm good, thanks.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. So I will call for the vote of the council members that are in the room. Please vote. And as Councillor Minhas reminded me, I actually have changed my order there, and the last time I mistakenly should have asked for the vote of the council members in the room first, rather than, so I'm correcting myself. But so the votes in the room have been cast. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Okay. Councillor Palat, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So there are 2 in favor. And that motion does carry unanimously. Councillor Thiessen, we can move on to our second part.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Second part is I would move that council approve a loan of $200,000 to the Swan City Hockey Association over a 5-year term at an interest rate of 4.25% with administration to recommend an appropriate funding source for the loan. Speaking to this motion, honestly, I came in here on the fence and through the discussion with our delegation and with management over the course of time, I feel fairly confident that this is a very low-risk venture for the city. My understanding is the funding source would be determined by administration with a leaning towards our financial stabilization reserve. The way I look at it is the 4.25% that is coming as part of the loan of the interest is a bit of an upgrade on what we would get in other loans maturing. So in a sense, we'd be making a little more off of this if the loan stands and the storm is good on their guarantee to borrow and pay back. So I'm not overly concerned about the loss of profit. The other reassurance that I got as well from the Grande Prairie storm here today was that it's actually a bit of a risk to own in a sense. So if they default on the loan, we would retain ownership rights. I'm sure that in discussion with our administration, we would make that abundantly clear and safe for the citizens of Grande Prairie, knowing that their tax money is meant to go to an organization that is not only supporting youth hockey and the building of community, but also creating something in our downtown core that supports business, culture, and the spirit of our community. As Councillor Bressie intimated earlier, one of the first questions he was asked when moving to Grande Prairie is, does it have a hockey team? And I do think sport does play a valuable part in our community, as does art and culture. And I would hate to lose this and then be sitting here 2 to 3 years later going, man, what if? And it's so hard to get that back. So for those reasons, I'm making this motion, and I am supporting the motion that I made, reluctantly or not. I think it's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. We'll move to Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm going to make a motion that at first might sound kind of funny given how I voted at the very beginning of this meeting, and that is I'm going to move that we postpone this motion until the April 8th City Council meeting. The difference between between voting on this later and the rest is, for the other decisions here, I feel that I've got all the information that I need, and council's been given all the information it needs to make an informed decision, and I didn't feel good postponing just because some council members couldn't be here. This, on the other hand, I feel that I don't have the information that I need to make a fully informed vote on this, and particularly what it is I'm trying to assess the risk of this loan. I don't think I'm really buying that if the team did go under, retaining ownership of it would have much value to us, and I don't think it's an asset we'd want. So for me, I'm really trying to evaluate how risky I think this loan is, and I think what postponing does is, first of all, it allows the season to end, and we can not just see projections, we could see firmer estimates of whether or not they actually finished the season in a profit, and if they did, then this loan becomes a lot less risky in my eyes. I'd also love, assuming that we do decide to accept financials and appoint a member to a board, I'd love to have a bit more involvement with them at a council level before we approve this loan. I'd remind us that management, which has been doing all the work on our behalf, hasn't recommended this loan, so I'm not comfortable making a recommendation from council and supporting it until council's had more involvement. The last thing I'd point out is cash flow has been a significant concern of the organization, which I really understand. But as a result of our last vote, they're going to be getting a $29,000 check from us to help with cash flow now. So I think that I understand that it's not easy for the organization to wait a couple more months, but if we postpone this, I'm going to be a lot more confident in my assessment of the risk of this loan.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. So a motion to postpone to a time definite is debatable, and so we can have discussion debate on Councillor Bressie's motion to postpone consideration of Councillor Thiessen's motion that Council approve the loan. We'll have discussion debate on Councillor Bressie's motion to postpone, and maybe perhaps I'll go first to the council members on the line, since I don't have anybody in the queue here in the council chambers. Councillor Clayton, would you like to have an opportunity to discuss Councillor Bressie's motion to postpone?
Yes, I would. Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I can't support this motion. It's unfortunate, Councillor Bressie, that you don't feel that you have all the information you need. This discussion has been going on for probably 6 to 8 months, many meetings at committee level. They've been to council before, prior to budget. There's been ample opportunity to get more information. This nonprofit board is led by professionals within our community and business leaders that run organizations in excess of even close to what this organization does on an annual basis. I think that it's almost rude to the point that we're questioning this so much. I think that getting more information is not going to change your decision. The information is in front of you, and I think that everybody's had more than enough time, and I can't support the motion to postpone this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Palat, do you wish to speak to Councillor Bressie's motion? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I guess I love the passion that we're having about a $200,000 conversation. I wish we could get this more topical when we're talking about a $170 million operational budget. But anyway, side note, we are talking about a $200,000 line item in our organization that, as Councillor Thiessen alluded to, actually gives us an opportunity to make a little bit of revenue off of. I also can speak on as a business owner on behalf of the organization. Cash flow stresses are not fun things to deal with, and by us postponing this and prolonging this, the storm's in a spot where they want to pay local vendors, local merchants that are outstanding, that they'd like to clear up their bills, which I think that we have an opportunity to do with them. So I don't see how postponing this helps the storm, helps the city, or anybody involved with this. So I wouldn't be able to support it as well.
Thanks, Councillor Palat. We'll go to council members that are in the room, and I see Councillor O'Toole in the queue.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gibbon. For the reasons that were just mentioned on both phone calls, I will not be supporting this. I think we've sort of been slow on the draw on giving these people an answer, and I think tonight would be the great day to give them an answer one way or the other, rather than keep them in the dark. So I will not be supporting this, and I would like to get this over with tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Anybody else in council chambers that wishes to speak to Councillor Bressie's motion to postpone? I don't see anybody else in the queue, so we'll go to Councillor Bressie to close. Councillor Bressie.
I do just want to comment on the idea of we've been talking about this for a year, and I should have the information that I want by now. A question that's been asked every single time we've met with the storm, to my recollection, and I know it was asked in the committee meeting, was more details about the money that it's outstanding right now. We've heard of generalities. There's some credit card loans. We've heard of generalities. There's some local merchants. We've heard of generalities that there's some stakeholders that have given loans. I still have no idea what the breakdown of those are. I have no idea what the interest rates of those are. And that's information. I really do apologize to Storm if that's because we didn't ask for it and we dropped the ball there. I apologize. I apologize for that. But without even knowing exactly what the team owes to who and what the interest rates are and what that looks like, I'm not comfortable. And I feel like I've been asking for that for a year, or it's been asked by councils for a year. I know it was asked the last committee meeting. So I'd push back suggesting that we have the information that we need. That's information that I feel would help me inform this decision I don't have right now.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie, for that motion, or for that close on your motion to postpone and it was time definite. You said April 8th. Thanks very much. So I will call for the vote. I will first ask the council members in the council chambers to vote. Please vote on Councillor Bressie's motion to postpone. Then I will ask for council members on the phone. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
Against.
Councillor Palat, how do you vote?
No.
Okay, thank you. So we have 2 noes on the line. And in council chambers, we had 2 in support of Councillor Bressy's motion and 3 opposed. So that makes 5 opposed. The motion to postpone does not carry. So we'll move on to consideration of the motion as originally moved. Is there any discussion or debate on Councillor Thiessen's motion as originally proposed? Councillor Bressy.
Yeah, I'm going to be voting no in it, and I really don't like voting no right now. Like I said, I don't have the information I feel I need right now, and I'm actually pretty confident that if I had that information in front of me, that it would line up with what I'd want to see, and I'd be confident. But I'm not willing to make a $200,000 bet on that information being what I think it probably is. So I'll be voting no. If this motion does fail and we don't give a loan, then I'd be quite prepared to make a notice of motion or figure out what the procedure bylaw allows me to do in a couple months to bring it back to council. Because for me, it's definitely not. I do want to give this loan. I just want to have a little bit more assurance than I have right now that it's secure.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressy. Anybody else for discussion debate on Councillor Thiessen's motion as originally moved?
Yes, Mayor Gavin, can I say something?
Sure, Councillor Clayton, go ahead.
Thanks. I absolutely support this motion for various reasons. I think that there's many opportunities within our community to enjoy recreation and culture, and some of them are opportunities that sometimes need a hand up. There's been organizations that have received in excess of $100,000 plus gift in kind for cultural events, and they were simply a sponsorship. This organization is coming to us and asking for a loan, and we're making a little bit of money off the loan based on what our borrowing rates are. I think this, in my opinion, this is a no-brainer. If any organization can be situated in a position, filled in a nonprofit board with professionals and business owners and willing to, first of all, throw their own money in to save the organization, and second of all, come and ask to borrow money and in turn pay interest to the municipality that's lending them the money, that's a no-brainer. This organization has proved that their sponsorship levels are up, their attendance is up, they've got a strong board, more than I can say for some organizations in our community, and I strongly encourage council to support this. I think they've done an excellent job of proving that they're on the right path, and they need our support now, and I encourage council to support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. The acting city manager just leaned in maybe with a little bit of additional context. Mr. Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So just in regards to the community living committee meeting that we had, perhaps it was a misunderstanding on my part, but there was discussion about if the loan was successful, then we would have an agreement with the Storm Association. We would list the different businesses that are owed the debt. And then through Mr. Clark and myself, we would ensure that they paid that debt, that the money didn't go back to the shareholders. I think that was my recollection of the discussion. So we assured the committee that should you approve the loan at council, then we'll track the payments. I apologize if you expected us to get the information from the storm. That wasn't my understanding. And so if that was a misunderstanding, it's my fault, and I'll take responsibility for it. I never made the ask of, well, I didn't pass it on to Mr. Clark, nor did we make the ask of the Storm Association. So,
much appreciated. So, administration viewed that as a contingent request, contingent upon the. Okay, fair enough, and thanks for that clarification. And thank you, Councillor Clayton. I see now Councillor O'Toole in the queue, and then Councillor Platt. I won't forget about you if you wish. I will come back around. Councillor O'Toole.
Thanks for coming.
I was at that meeting. I do recall those statements, and I think everybody at the table was pretty comfortable with with that statement. I will be supporting this. I feel that the individuals that are on that board are key people in the community that know business. And as Councillor Clayton said, I think this was a turning point for the club. They've got good people. They've made some great decisions to make a comeback and get their wheels back on the ground. And I think this is an opportunity for the city to show their support to the community. And yeah, I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. I see Councillor Bressy.
Thank you. Just the acting city manager, I I just want to point out that although I had those questions, I wasn't actually the one that asked them at committee. So it's quite possible that the misunderstanding was with me too. So I want to say that the egg might be on my face as well. So I appreciate that, but I just wanted to say that as well.
Councillor Plott, do you wish to weigh in on the motion to approve the $200,000 loan?
I would be in support of it. I can appreciate where Councillor Bressy was going with this, and I really want to thank Director Miller for his honesty and just owning the scenario. But I guess I'm going to just throw out a friendly amendment because I think it's just maybe something that would put a few councillors' members at ease. But that we approve the loan subject to administration approving the outstanding debt to the storm, and we issue the checks to those vendors.
Sure. How about subject to agreement that
I don't have a piece of paper in front of me to wordsmith it out better.
Sure. And so sort of adding that contingent subject to administration
reviewing and approving the
disbursement of the funds.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our recording secretary, Councillor Plott moves to make an amendment to add subject to agreement that city administration will review and approve the ultimate disbursement of the funds. Does that capture it, Councillor Plott?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gibbon.
Okay, and so that motion is, we're making amendments tonight. We're voting on amendments, and so Councillor Plott has made an amendment. We can have a round of discussion debate on Councillor Plott's amendment, if we so choose. Councillor Thiessen?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. Obviously, I'm being swayed on all the amendments here, but I'd like to thank Councillor Plott for adding that little touch. It shows a bit of due diligence on the organization, little oversight via council to help ensure and alleviate any council member's concern. This is all the reason why I wanted to table this meeting tonight, because I think this round of discussion and debate is going to land everybody ultimately in a happy place. Where we can at least agree on the best case scenario moving forward if we were going to proceed with this loan. So thank you, Councillor Plott, for phoning in and being a part of the discussion. Thank you, Councillor Bressy, for challenging it, and thank you all members of council for at least chiming in for this one. I do believe it's an important thing that we are discussing here today, as large or as small as a loan may be. This storm to me is a fairly vital component of our downtown core that is supported by many, many local businesses. And I want to ensure the best case scenario for our ratepayers as well and the citizens of Grande Prairie. And I think we can find a happy medium between all those things through this amendment. So I would urge council to support Councillor Platt's amendment to this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, Mayor Gibbon, I just got a question. Mr. Miller has already mentioned that this was a plan that the administration was going to do, and I was just wondering if we're a little bit redundant here by making the motion that administration already had planned to do this sort of thing.
I think the point that Councillor Bressy brought to the table about his sort of request for this information and a sense or feeling that it hadn't been acted upon illustrates the reason why council should, if council wants administration to do something, should typically put it in the form of a motion so it's recorded. Everybody can see what council voted on and directed administration to do, and administration clearly understands what council expected. So I think it's, even if administration was working under that understanding, it certainly doesn't hurt to ensure that everybody around the table, including the storm, are clear with what the expectations are.
With that being said, I do support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Gibbon, can I have a point of clarification on the motion? So I guess my concern, I appreciate where the motion is going. My concern would be that I don't think it's council's role to get into the position of reviewing invoices and old debt per se. You know, it's probably an in-camera matter depending on how old the debt is, if it becomes close to a legal situation. So if the intent of the motion is to make sure that outstanding suppliers within our community are paid, and that administration is going to follow up on that, then I support the motion. But if the intent of the motion is to see these invoices at a council level and go through them, then I can't support the motion.
No, yeah, and thanks for asking for the additional clarity. The motion is phrased in such a way that it is actually administration reviewing the disbursement of the funds, not council, and so there wasn't any intent expected in Councillor Plott's motion to have that come to council. It was that just clarifying that there's an expectation that administration would see that information before the funds are dispersed.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks for getting that clarity. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so we will call for the vote on Councillor Plott's amendment. I will first call for the vote of the council members in the room. Please vote on Councillor Plott's amendment. Thank you. And council members on the phone, Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Councillor Plott, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. So those are 2 yeses on the phone, and there were 5 yeses in the room, and so that adds up to 7. Unanimous. And so we can move on to Councillor Thiessen's motion to approve the loan as amended, which added that sort of requirement for administration to review the disbursement of the funds. Is there any other discussion or debate on the main motion as amended? I haven't entered the queue to debate on any of these. I'll just say that I will be supporting the motion. And I suppose ultimately it's because I believe, first off, that the Storm were impacted, as many other organizations were in our community, by the financial downturn that led to a direct decrease in their sponsorship or the ability of businesses to sponsor them. Unlike many other cultural or recreation sort of sporting institutions in our community, they didn't have the benefit of ongoing government support. And I do ultimately believe that from time to time, or even often, we have to invest in those things that make a place a community rather than just a place to live. And I think the Storm are a great example of that, along with other things that we do to make Grande Prairie a great place to live. And so that's why I support the motion. Councillor Bressie?
Thank you. I just as we learned, sometimes I don't make sure I'm crystal clear on things, and sometimes I mess up because of that. So I want to make sure that I'm crystal clear on that. So my understanding is with the motion as amended, I want to make sure that administration is the same way, that it's not just that it wouldn't just be approving the order of disbursements, but where disbursements go, and that it would go to high-interest credit card loans and local vendors, but it wouldn't go to stakeholders if it's looking like we're not going to get paid.
So, sorry, Councillor. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get part of our.
Sorry, Councillor Bressie, I'm just going to interrupt to say, for our council members that are on the phone, please, if you can, make sure your phones are on mute until I recognize you. Councillor Bressie?
So I guess I'm just trying to, what I'm trying to figure out is whether it's with the disbursements or whether it's in the agreement. I just want to look at administration. Is there intent to formalize the commitment that was made that we would get paid back before these shareholders and these contributors would get paid?
Mr. Miller, how would administration interpret that?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So I think my understanding then is working through the Storm with the agreement, we would pay back the local businesses that are owed debt and the high interest loans. And at the same time, they'd also be paying back the city. But the shareholders or stakeholders would be in the future. They'd be the last ones to be paid back.
And would the intent be, or is there a way to do that in terms of the contract we have them sign or whatever to formalize that commitment that they've made?
That's our intent. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's our intent, to formalize that and then monitor it as well through Mr. Clark and myself.
Okay. Thanks for that question of clarification, Councillor Bressie. Where were we? We were on the Councillor Thiesen's main motion. As amended, thank you. Is there any other discussion or debate either in the room first or on the phone on Councillor Thiesen's motion? Seeing and hearing none, then I will call for the vote on Councillor Thiesen's motion as amended. First, I will call for the vote of the council members in the room. Please vote. Thank you. And for the council members on the phone, Councillor Plott, how do you vote?
Yes, and my apologies for not knowing how to use my mute button properly. So.
Thanks, Councillor Plott. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
Yes, in favor.
Okay, so we have 2 yes, and I will display the results in the room. We have 5 yeses in the room, so that's 7. That is unanimous vote. We can move on to the next portion. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I guess I'll look to you for direction, Your Worship. The next motion is quite convoluted. It's very long. There's 6 different pieces to it. I can read it all out as is. I can just suggest that Council approve as it is, noted, or I could separate the motions.
I think, Councillor Thiessen, I think for our purposes tonight, and maybe if there's agreement with Council, I think it's worthwhile for us to read out so that the public knows the different portions of the agreement. But Council, if we could, can we deal with them as a package rather than needing to split them or anything? But I think for the record, it's important that we identify specifically sort of the concessions and agreements that we're setting up with the storm, and also the additional accountability that the city's expecting from them as well. So if you just read through them once, then we can discuss and debate it as a whole.
Shouldn't be a problem. I've been reading to school children all this week and last week, so here we go. I would move that Council approve, as recommended by administration. Number 1, the Storm Lounge to operate each home game midway through the 3rd period until 1 hour after game's conclusion. Crystal Catering to manage this service on behalf of the Storm and bill the team for inventory, a staff member at $15 per hour, and any food that they might request, with any net revenue to be retained by the Storm. Revolution Place will supply and pay for 1 guest services staff member. Number 2, a member of City Council to sit on the Grande Prairie Storm Board as a voting member. Number 3, the Grande Prairie Storm 2018-2019 business plan to be reviewed by the Revolution Place General Manager, discussed, and any concerns addressed. Number 4, monthly financial statements, statement of financial position, a balance sheet, and statement of operations, an income statement, to be filed with the city within 15 days of month end, and annual notice to reader, statements to be filed with the City of Grande Prairie Finance Department within 60 days of fiscal year end. And 5, annual end of season review of the storm's operations with City Council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. So we'll open up for discussion debate on that suite of additional considerations and obligations that the city would place on the storm. Any discussion or debate from my council members in the room? Anybody? Councillor Thiessen, I'll come to you to close. Is there anybody else in the room? I don't see anybody else. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I would support the motion that's presented of supporting and meeting the number of asks, and yeah.
Councillor O'Toole. I'll just say one thing that I would encourage people to, although they're sort of buried in the middle of that, to identify that there are additional requirements provided on the storm in terms of the city providing appropriate oversight, and also direct involvement in sort of the direction of the club, or at least I guess a little bit closer understanding of the operation of the club by virtue of a position on the board. It'd be my intention to bring back a recommendation to council at our subsequent council meeting on who that council member might be, in discussion with council members. But yeah, just in terms of this long list of things, a significant amount of it really relates directly to accountability and oversight by the city, and in partnership with the storm. And so I just wanted to highlight that. I don't see anybody else in the council chamber in the queue. Councillor Palat, did you care to speak to this motion?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Clayton, did you care to speak to the motion?
Yeah, just something quickly. I support the motion because of the conversation with the organization. They've been in agreement to this. However, I just want it to be noted that I don't want this organization to feel in any way that they're being punished or that we're putting their thumb down on them, because there are many organizations that we sponsor in our community with much less regimented controls. And so I find it a little bit unfortunate when an organization is looking to borrow money and we're putting all these rules on them, and I don't want them to feel punished in any way. I appreciate the work they've done and what they're providing for our community. So thank you for being forthcoming and honest and open to the opportunities and agreeing with administration what the these regimented restrictions will be. However, I just don't want this conversation to feel like it's been constant thumb over this organization who I feel has worked very hard when there's other organizations that we do not put these parameters on. So thank you for your work, and I will support this motion.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. So I don't see anybody else in the queue other than Councillor Thiessen to close.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I think you're reading over my sheets because exactly what I wrote is it's the appropriate amount of oversight that would alleviate any concerns and provide accountability for the general public, of which we're governing their money for. So way to go, Mr. Long Reader. And thank you, Councillor Clayton. I agree with you as well, wherever you may be, that this does seem pretty regimented. But I think it is appropriate, and in discussion with the Storm at committee meetings, they've been more than willing to be forthright and actually welcomed all of this additional oversight so that they couldn't be scrutinized within the community. So I'd like to also thank our administration for working with the Storm and putting together these recommendations, as they were the only recommendations besides the base rent of zero that was amended at our committee meeting. But I do think in itself these are great recommendations, and in line with the loan, even more than appropriate. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. So I will call for the vote on that suite of items. First from the council members in the council chamber. Please vote. Thank you. I see all 5 have been entered. I'll go to the council members on the phone. Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
In favor.
Councillor Palat, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. That's 2 in favor. And in the council chamber, there's another 5 in favor, so that motion carries unanimously. That concludes
Sorry, I've got one more on this, actually, Mayor Given.
Councillor Bressie, sorry, you had an additional item?
I want to make sure that, my apologies if I just missed this, but did we identify a funding source for that loan?
In the motion, it was actually read administration to identify appropriate funding source. If administration has done that, they could inform us of this at this point, I guess. Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Mayor Given. We would identify the financial stabilization reserve for the funding source.
Thanks very much.
So do we need a specific motion for that? I just hate, we've heard how cash flow is an issue. I'd hate for this to get held up for 2 weeks till we can come back and approve it. So do we need a specific motion to authorize from that reserve?
Ms. Walker?
Yes, we should have a motion funding from a reserve. Yes.
Okay. Councillor Bressie, would you care to make that motion?
Sure. I would move that council approve the financial stabilization reserve as the source of the loan approved in this meeting.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Any discussion or debate on that motion? Seeing none in the council chamber, do either of my council members on the line wish to speak to that motion? I don't hear anyone, and so I will call for the vote of council members in the room on this item. Please vote. And then I will go to the telephone line. Councillor Clayton, are you still there? Did you hear Councillor Bressie's additional motion identifying the funding source?
Yes, in favor.
Thank you. And Councillor Palat?
Yes, in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's 2 in favor and 5 in council chamber. That makes 7. Unanimous. Thanks very much. And thanks, Councillor Bressie, for that catch. And Director Walker. And I think that handles all the items related to item 9.1.1. That was the item that our 2 council members had called in for. Councillor Clayton, Councillor Palat, thank you very much for your patience this evening, and thanks for calling in so you could vote and be a part of the debate on this important item.
Thanks,
everyone.
Good night. Councillor Thiessen, was there anything else to highlight from that set of committee minutes?
Oh, I got a whole lot of highlights from that committee meeting, and I'd love to talk about it, and I will here. Anyways, the couple other items came mostly for committee work, nothing directed to council, but affordable housing strategy scope of work was undertaken. We received a presentation from staff, Mr. Reid DeRoche, regarding an affordable housing strategy. He proposed a scope of work that would involve extensive research and engagement to develop an affordable housing strategy for Grande Prairie, and the proposal was to develop this housing corporation concurrently with the affordable housing strategy, and only to engage consultants for specialized supports. So it was really important. A nice, excellent presentation by a member of our administration, also highlighting the fact that that he thought that most of the work could be done in-house and it wouldn't be at a detriment to our planning team. So that motion was made, and we'll be seeing the proposed scope of work coming forward in regards to the affordable housing strategy to a future committee meeting. Also, I think it'd be important not to, or to note, sorry, that we also undertook a land acknowledgement policy that was brought forward by Mayor Given. And committee directed administration to develop a council policy and associated administrative procedure with respect to traditional land acknowledgements. So look forward to that policy coming forward, and thank you, Mayor Given, for bringing that up at our committee meeting, as I do believe that's very important for our area and region. And then I'd just like to touch on a few things from the director's service area. New play care hours were implemented at the Eastlink Centre as of January 1st. And there was a change in time slots from 2 hours to 1.5 hours. We also have upcoming here in the next week the annual volunteer recognition event planned for February 6th, where we will award outstanding achievements regarding the George Repka Smith and the Bill Boros Organization of the Year Award. And we'll be presenting our winners at this event as chosen by council and nominated by the community. And a good news story, the target key performance indicator for Revolution Place was exceeded in 2018 with a total of 34,000 plus tickets sold. It is the busiest the venue has been in over a decade, and we are hoping that the volume will increase this year, but it is expected to rank in the top 5 among Canadian venues with less than 5,000 seats for the year 2018. The outdoor rink program has been well utilized throughout the city. And in regards to transit, phase 1 of the County Connector pilot project is progressing as expected. There's a slow increase in riders each week, and hopefully there will be more and more slowly filling up those buses. And phase 2 begins early next week on February 4th with services going out to Wembley and Beaver Lodge. And finally, in regards to fleet, more transit news and good news that power is being installed to charge the electric buses. It's been a long time coming for these to hit our city streets, and as of now, the buses are still on track to be ready to use early in February. So hopefully at the latest, sometime after we present our George Repka Smith and Bill Bose Awards. But that's all I have for updates, and glad to be there, glad to present.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. We'll move on to item 9.2, and I don't think we have any of the councillors that were at the meeting or on the committee here today, and so I think Councillor Bressie, you'd offered to step in and move the minutes and the recommendations.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Given. I'm happy to make the motion since you as chair can't make the motions, but I feel kind of funny talking about a meeting I wasn't at, so maybe if there's any summary that needs to be done or catching up other than motions, I'll let you do that at the end instead of me. So I would move that council approve the minutes of the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee meeting held Tuesday, January 5th, Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019 as presented.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Any discussion or debate on that set of minutes? For those of you that were there, did they accurately reflect the meeting? Oh, that was only me. Never mind. Are there any other errors or omissions? I didn't see any errors or omissions that needed to be amended. And I don't see anybody else ringing in with any, so I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Bressie?
Thank you. I would move that council give first reading to bylaw C 1365A, being an amendment to the utility bylaw.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. No discussion or debate on first reading, of course, so I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I would move that council give second reading to bylaw C 1365A, and just speak to this. I think we heard from Alcatera in terms of why they're asking for the increase, and I think it's reasonable asking for inflationary increase when you're taking on, especially when you're taking on major capital projects. So I've had some people comment, well, why doesn't the city give up some of its dividends to make these utilities cheaper? And that's an intent I really appreciate. One of the reasons that I ran for council was because I want to make this an easier city for families, especially families struggling to live in. That being said, a lot of our water goes to large commercial or industrial operations, and a lot of our water goes to some of the biggest buildings in the city are run by the province and consume a lot of water. And right now we're charging the median rate across the province for that water. If we give up some of our dividends to charge less for water, then we need to make up for that with property taxes. And what's going to happen if we do that, then all of a sudden provincial buildings are going to be spending less on water here than they are elsewhere, and they're going to be doing that at the expense of our taxpayers. And I hate to see Grande Prairie money going elsewhere in the province. So I think that it makes sense that we take dividends and that we generate money from utilities. It's one of the few ways that we can get some of the money back from municipal services that non-property tax paying buildings give. So I really do support making it easier for families, but I think I'd rather give them a larger property tax break than a smaller water utility tax break. So I hope council will support this.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Any discussion or debate on second reading? Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just very briefly, I am reluctantly going to vote in favor of this motion. I do think we need to have a conversation with Aquaterra as to where the profitability goes and how it affects city ratepayers. I don't think it's fair to have sort of the gun to our head to make the decision to use our dividend check on a municipally owned corporation to reduce the rates as small as it is. I'd like to see a business plan coming forward from Aquaterra for either more investments or more equalized investments, I suppose, within the city, and or with an emphasis on maybe less profitability and more making it easier on our taxpayers. This is going to be $2 every year for the next 2 years. In 2 years, we can have this discussion on the rates and what they plan to do with the money. And my hope is that we can find some ground and get some Aquaterra investment into our city streets, I suppose, and also lessen the impact on our ratepayers. But for now, I can approve this, but I hope that this is a conversation that we have in the future and also moving into our ICF discussions as well.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I don't see anybody else in the queue. I'd just say that maybe slightly buried there below the lead is the fact that Aquaterra is again reducing solid waste removal rates. And so the total amount, while it is an increase, means that our water rates are in the median, directly in the middle of comparable municipalities. So we're paying not the highest, not the lowest, but we're right in the middle. And Aquaterra has consistently worked to reduce the one area where our rates were higher than other municipalities, and that's in solid waste removal. And so I think we really should acknowledge that work that they're doing to say there's an area where it can legitimately be said that their rates are out of line with what you might pay in another community. And in that area, that specific area is the one that is decreasing. And so I just want to make sure that we make that acknowledgement of the fact that they are sensitive to the impact of rates, and they are sensitive to how their rates compare with other municipalities and other service providers across the province. Having said that, I will be in support of second reading. I don't see anybody else in the queue to speak to second reading, so I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor...
Thank you. I would move that we have third reading of bylaw C 1365A at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. So again, you heard that. That was a motion to have third and final reading. It must pass unanimously. Otherwise, it would come back at a subsequent council meeting. Is there any discussion or debate as to the merits of having third and final reading? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Bressie, we can have third and final reading.
Thank you. I would move that we give third readings bylaw C 1365A, being an amendment to the utility bylaw. And one other thing I'll say is, as this has been in the media, I've had a few people in the community express concern over us raising rates, which again is a very valid concern. My question to them is, I've been asked, how much do you think that rates are going up by? And I've heard everywhere from $5 to $30 a month that they've said. I want to point out that this is the net impact when we factor in solid waste decreasing is, for a typical property, is 72 cents a year. So it's about $8.60 or something like that. It's under $9 a year. And as much as I'd love to save families that $9 a year, by saving them that $9 a year, we'd have to charge them even more than that in extra property tax to make up for this.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. That is a motion for third and final reading. Is there any discussion or debate? Again, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And Councillor Bressie, you have one final complicated motion.
Awesome. Well, I would move that council direct administration to cooperate with other Alberta municipalities, AUMA, Aquaterra, producers and recyclers of packaging and paper products, and the province of Alberta to develop a baseline that can inform the design of a provincial EPR program by researching the benefits, challenges, and risks of an EPR program in Alberta for these groups and their constituents, and the current recycling systems and supply chains across the province, and potential impacts of an EPR program in Alberta. I'd also move that we direct administration to report back through the Infrastructure Protected Services Committee no later than October 2019. And just to explain this motion to everybody watching at home, not being at the meetings, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but an EPR program is something where both the financial costs and or the managerial responsibility of recycling programs is taken from whoever owns it now, which right now is us as a municipality through Aquaterra, and transfers it to the companies that actually produce waste, and likely from them to the consumer as they charge to do that. The advantages of an EPR program is often producers are way more able to control waste than consumers are. If I need a product, I'm going to probably buy it whether or not it's got lots of waste on it. A producer, they've actually got the ability to cut that waste if that will save them money in this program. The other thing going on right now is a lot of provinces already have EPR programs which drive up the rates for producers, and they've set their national prices to take that into account. So right now, Alberta consumers often, we're paying for a product that has costs to run recycling programs in other provinces attached to it. And I really don't want to see more Alberta money than goes through equalization going out of our province. So therefore, it would really make sense for us as a province to have this program to be more in line with most of the rest of Canada. So I hope the council will support us supporting others in lobbying for an EPR program to be part of Alberta, and I hope somebody will correct me if I've explained any of that wrong.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bressy. No, I think you explained it accurately. I think the only other nuance that I would add that was contained in the report is that this is an initiative led by the City of Calgary. They are attempting to build a number of municipalities working in the same direction here. And my understanding is that AUMA and the City of Calgary are ultimately providing the majority of the funding to do this study and this research, and that what they're looking for from other municipalities is essentially the data that we might be able to provide them and sort of the endorsement of that effort. And so really there's not to my knowledge, other than any amount of staff time that might be required to this, which would likely come through Aquaterra. There isn't a cost to the City of Grande Prairie. The only other thing that I would point out is that there was an order of magnitude estimate of how much this could mean to Alberta consumers, and it's in the area of approximately $60 million a year, I believe. Was what was contained in the report. And so if we think about Aquaterra bills, which were just on previously, City of Grande Prairie residents certainly have a fee for recycling that's on our bill. And at least a part of the idea is that fee for recycling may not be necessary were that burden passed on. Actually, were Albertans able to take advantage of the fact that many manufacturers and producers are building recycling costs into the cost of their goods that we're already purchasing. So we are, in a sense, paying for it twice. We're paying for it in the cost of the goods, and we're paying for it in our local municipalities through things like recycling fees. So there may be a chance to reduce costs that people pay on Aquaterra bills in the end. Other than that, I think you did a fantastic job of reporting that, considering you weren't there at the meeting. Is there any other discussion or debate? I don't see anybody ringing in, so I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And Councillor Bressy, again, thanks very much for stepping in to handle that 7 minutes and those motions. There was only one other item that came, and that was a letter of correspondence from the Francophone School Board requesting a school site in the north of the city. That was the first time that council had seen that request, and the outcome from the meeting was to refer that request to administration to contact the Francophone School District and to first inform them of what the process is for working with the city to identify school sites, and to work with them to identify a potential site into the future. And so that work is ongoing, but I guess that was just last week when we gave administration that direction. And I would imagine that discussion will be ongoing over the next little while, but I think that was the only other thing that wasn't covered by a motion. And so that should finish all of our committee business. We have no items of correspondence. With our delegations, we did have a delegation with respect to the Aquaterra business plan that was dealt with our dealing with the rate bylaws. And it was a while ago now, so I don't remember if we had any other delegations other than that, and our Grande Prairie Storm delegation, of course, that was also dealt with. So I don't think there was any others that didn't deal with an item that was on our agenda. We We have no notices of motion, and I did ask around, and I don't think any council members had reports from their external agencies, boards, or commissions. I will just do, that being the case, I will just do one brief one. I did attend the Northern Alberta Elected Leaders. I attended actually as a member of the AUMA board, and Councillor Clayton attended on the City of Grande Prairie's behalf as Deputy Mayor. AUMA is making a larger effort to ensure that the board is more represented at the sort of zone or district level, so we can be in more regular communication with our smaller members who might not regularly travel to Edmonton or to our conferences. The NAL meeting was held in St. Isidore. It was a great opportunity to go and meet with members of that organization and hear about some of the concerns in the smaller and rural municipalities. There was an item that was raised that may end up leading to a resolution coming to the AUMA Leaders Caucus. And it has to do with assessment year modifiers on linear properties. And so it is actually an issue that is more specifically rural, but the members of the Northern Alberta Elected Leaders saw some utility in sort of forwarding that through dual channels, both through RMA and through the AUMA channel. And so as the AUMA rep, I was happy to be able to be there and support them in that and to connect them with the AUMA staff that can help them in that process. That's the only thing I wanted to highlight with that one. We can move to Councilmember Roundtable, and we'll start with Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I've got two things I'd like to highlight. One is last week I chose to attend Grande Prairie Aboriginal Circle of Services meeting, which was great hearing about some of the organizations there and getting to connect, and they appreciated having me there. The thing I want to highlight there is it's held in the museum, and we started with a smudge, and I was proud of our city. I know that there's a lot of cities where municipal facilities aren't available for that. And so I was proud of our city that I got to participate in that in a municipal facility, and that's not the first time I've done that in a municipal facility. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Second thing I want to highlight is, as you know, I've been participating in consultation meetings for the province looking at reviewing the Police Act, and they've been really good. My key phrase has been I've been appropriately obnoxious, bringing up funding at every opportunity. And that was the reason I started going, but I've been pleasantly surprised by how much I've learned at these meetings. And one thing I've been thinking about is if it's a conversation we need to have, or if it's just me getting excited about a potential new shiny toy, is I wasn't aware that in the Police Act, right now we're giving RCMP oversight very informally, just through our IPS committee. There is a mechanism in the legislation to form a police committee to give more formal oversight. It's still pretty weak oversight, but it is more formalized and a little bit stronger than what we got. I'm kind of wondering if that's a conversation we should have thinking about forming one of those. I think the two reasons are I'm very satisfied with our status quo right now, but I'm also very conscious that it's partly because we've got a mayor who really understands policing, and I really trust to represent the needs of council. And also we've got a superintendent who is very willing to work with us. Talk to other communities, that's not always the case. And I'm wondering if a committee might be useful if we ever find ourselves in not as an ideal situation. The thing is, I really have a feeling that that policing on a municipal level in our country is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years, and it might change in the next year or two if the Police Act gets reviewed. And I wonder if it might be worthwhile getting some experience with a governance organization for policing, so that if change does happen suddenly and we all of a sudden need to form a commission, something more formal, we've got some people in our community that have experience and have some competencies. So that's been something I've been thinking about maybe bringing up at an IPS committee someday. Like I said, I still haven't quite decided, but you might hear about that more from me.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I did a number of events this last couple of weeks, and one of them was I was appointed to the UDI discussion group, and it was a very interesting meeting. We spent an hour and a half, and there was good topics and good discussion. And it was a board that was trying to make this committee is trying to make the city more beneficial to everybody in the community by raising some topics and for, once again, discussion. So I appreciate being there. It was a great thing. Also, today I attended the Supervised Consumption Services Open House. I seen a vehicle there that will hopefully be getting the opportunity to operate in our community fairly soon. and I can see where it could possibly save a number of lives in the near future. So I hate to have this sort of equipment in the facility in our city, but in the end, it is one of those things that it's a need at this point, and I do appreciate the app and to have that ability to have it here. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Minhas. Nothing to cover? Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Thiessen.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm just going to highlight three things here. First off, I had the privilege to join the City Council alumni as part of the TED Talk group. So when I say City Council, I'm talking about Councillor Eunice Friesen, I'm talking about our interim city manager, Horacio Galante, and now Chris Thiessen can add his name to the TED Talks group. Hopefully you'll see it online here once they have it all edited. But it was out in Peace River, and the TEDx Grand Prairie people put it together. And I just wanted to put a big shout out to the organizers, Dave Doyle, Tosh Magombi, and Victoria Champion. What a glorious name that is, Victoria Champion. Kudos to her parents for naming her that. The event was fairly incredible and well attended. In fact, it was sold out in Peace River, and it was so cool being in Peace River. I was wearing an I Heart Peace River t-shirt talking about calendar change underneath a banner that said TEDx Grand Prairie. So it was just sort of weird that a councillor for the city of Grand Prairie was wearing the Peace River t-shirt underneath the Grand Prairie banner. It's like we took Grand Prairie and put it out there on the beautiful Peace River. So thank you to the organizers. It was a world-class event, and the best TED Talks I've been a part of now is 4, 3 as an MC, and 1 now as an actual TED Talker. So I was really honored to be able to participate in that. Equally, I was honored to participate in Literacy Week, both last week and this week. Counting it out, I ended up talking or reading to students in grade 1 and 5 at Isabel Campbell School, kindergarten and grade 6 at Riverstone, 2 kindergarten classes at St. Gerard, grade 1s, 2 grade 1 classes at Aspen Grove. I still have dates at Hillside and Avondale, but I make mention of it because it's very, very important. Oh, I like that. Direct translation, that's saying read to your kids every night and every chance you get, because it's time that you enjoy, and you'll never get back if you choose not to. I also want to give a shout out to Arlene Karbaszewski. I had the opportunity to bring some chapter books into these schools, and some might not know this about our admin assistant, but she is an author that has published a book called Treasure Kings about geocaching and the adventures of a couple brothers. I tried to read it at Isabel Campbell School, but it got voted down, so I didn't give the kids at Riverstone an opportunity, because I read this story with my son. I thoroughly enjoyed it, so did he. And when I told the kids I was going to read this, this is a local author. The story actually takes place in the Peace River area. Once I cracked it from chapter 1, the kids didn't want me to stop even after my half hour of reading was done. So I donated it to the library at Riverstone, and hopefully someone will pick it up from the classroom that read it to find out how the rest of that geocache adventure went. Finally, the third thing I'd just like to touch upon, 18 years ago, when I was 22 years old, my brother, Cornelius John Thiessen IV, at the age of 18 years old, decided to commit suicide. The only reason why I bring this up right now is because we are approaching a time where the Bell promotion, Let's Talk, is happening. And I bring it up largely because the most vulnerable population of people suffering from mental health that don't actually have an outlet, that are sometimes too proud to go and talk to people when they are facing a mental health crisis, are men, believe it or not. So I bring this up to encourage all people to talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and especially when you're down. Don't lock yourself in a room. Don't refuse to reach out for help, and don't think that you can deal with it by yourself, because sometimes the outcome leaves many, many questions to the people that you've left behind, especially if you think that your last resort is to do what my brother did 18 years ago at the 18 years of age. So it's Bell Let's Talk. I encourage everybody to support each other's mental health, be there for each other, and reach out when you need help, because sometimes it's the difference between a great life and or a horrible death. And remember, while we live, that you can't have any rainbows without a little bit of rain and a mixture of sunshine. So be the sunshine in people's life, and reach out for the colors that makes living worthwhile. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen. And with that, we'll call our meeting adjourned. Thank you.